Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
They're finally leaving, Marjorie commented, looking from her balcony alongside her grandmother. Yes, it seems our guests have really left, Olenna remarked. Is this the last time we will see him? Olenna asked calmly, while Marjorie seemed a bit affected by this. What's wrong? Don't tell me you've fallen for that boy. Olenna spoke with an inquiring tone. No, Marjorie responded. Don't come at me with that, Marjorie. I know you're attracted to John Artica, and I can't blame you. Not when his visit was full of highs and lows, with him winning the tournament, slaying those who challenged him, and defending his wife. The royal guard is still in a coma, and will wake up to the news that he will no longer be able to see with one of his eyes, Olenna commented calmly. Tell me, will I have a husband like Serena? She didn't hesitate to ask. Marjorie may not have met John's second wife, who returned to the kingdom, but she certainly looked at Serena with a certain envy. She had a ruthless husband despite his young age, and was still a smart and strong queen from what she could talk. Even the knowledge that Serena and Arya had surpassed any noble lady, equaling with a maester. Sometimes they even talked among themselves in a different language without anyone knowing what they were whispering to one another. I know she is a lucky woman, Olenna admitted. But remember, you will have something better than disputing a throne beyond the wall with other wives, who are already expecting a child from the Arctic King. The Iron Throne, my dear. That's all that matters, Olenna said with a more serious tone than usual, while Marjorie nodded at the end. Yes, Grandma, I will be the Queen of Westeros, she said, regaining her confidence while looking firmly at Olenna. That's what I wanted to hear. The Iron Throne will be better than any ice crown you would find in the north, girl. You will be the greatest queen Westeros has ever seen and will bring our family to the highest point of its history, Olenna said with a firm tone, not caring about whom she would marry, but how she would take the Iron Throne through the marriage of the fool she would bring to bed. Marjorie nodded. After all, this was also her own desire to become a queen. As much as her heart had been divided by passion and duty, she would choose what she grew up learning. Even though John didn't seem to care much for her beauty, she had been amazed by everything he had done since he arrived and his charm. What you feel now is just passion, something that will soon cool off with time, Olenna told her granddaughter to learn. After her granddaughter nodded to her, Olenna spoke again. Now, let's talk with your brothers. After all, we have a long conversation with them, Olenna said, starting to leave the balcony, followed by Marjorie, entering the castle and going to a room where Willis, Garland, and even Loras were waiting for them. As they entered, with the looks from Marjorie's brothers, Olenna sat down calmly at the table for her grandchildren. Well, let's begin then. I would even call your father, but the fool wouldn't help at all in this meeting. So let's talk among ourselves, Olenna spoke, while the Tyrell brothers nodded. To start, we learned many things about our visitors. First, we found an ideal match for Willis to become the Lord of Highgarden. She commented, as Willis raised an eyebrow, since his grandmother had instructed him to court this same woman in the last few days. It's not just us who saw this. Many nobles are also interested in the girl. I'm sure that soon, Winterfell will be raining ravens with marriage proposals for Lord Stark. She passed before continuing. But there's also another thing we must analyze before asking for a marriage between Willis and Arya. After all, we have Sansa Stark too, and putting her in marriage with Willis would be even more advantageous politically for us. After all, that would open up the royal marriage for us. Arya may have shown herself to be a very intelligent woman, and perhaps someone could have led our family with Willis, having so much knowledge and skills. But putting Sansa as the Lady of Highgarden doesn't seem bad either. After all, we would take her out of the possible marriage between Sansa Stark and Joffrey Baratheon, she said calmly, while the others listened attentively. Arya couldn't be set to marry the prince then? Willis asked. That's true. However, I have a way to get the best of both worlds, to have Arya marry Willis and at the same time deny Sansa's marriage to the prince. Olenna spoke. How would that be, Grandma? Marjorie asked curiously. That's a little secret of this old lady. But to achieve this, I will have to talk personally with Ned Stark. So, we'll have to wait a bit longer. Olenna commented with a small smile. Grandma, the things that happened here today will soon reach King's Landing. Don't you think some things might change? Garland was the one who commented this time. You are absolutely right. They will hear about the Artican Company soon. But speaking of which, is strange. We haven't received any more ravens from King's Landing or Oldtown, where they are always eager to speak with us. But anyway, let's wait and see what the king thinks of all this, Olenna commented. She then looked back at her desk, where the contracts were. Even though it's been a bit turbulent, with the visit of the Articans, we certainly gained from it. Besides him spending over 1 million gold coins with us, although a large part of that was ours, Olenna spoke with a darker tone this time, wanting to curse her son for the folly of betting 200,000 gold coins on a game like a blind fool. I'm sure their products will also be quite popular all over Westeros, and now we have control of them in the entire kingdom. I just hope nothing happens that we have to cancel this, she commented. Garland spoke right after. I would also not like to make enemies of him. Grandma, those giants, and from what I've heard, there are many of them in his army. We would be screwed on a battlefield fighting against those things. He didn't fail to comment. That's not a worry, my grandson. When, and if, we possibly go to war against them, which I find very unlikely, we will have much more than any army they could muster from that desert beyond the wall. Olenna spoke with a mocking tone. She then turned to her only grandson, who had said nothing. And what does the prince think of all this, Loras? She asked. Loras was silent for a while, seeming hesitant to speak. Are you still angry about losing the tournament? Or are you jealous? Olenna said with Loras turning gloomy. It's not that, Grandma. He spoke, but he was frustrated, first for losing the tournament and jealous over the level of attention Renly was giving Jon Artica. Not that Jon was interested in a man, as Jon found Renly excessively annoying with his friendly posture to a point that seemed forced, but for Loras, it was petty jealousy. Stop this foolishness and answer my question, Olenna said with a more demanding tone, and Loras nodded quickly. The prince sees Jon Artica as a great ally. He even says that although he lost lands on the coast in his kingdom to the Articans, he still gained a closer ally too. He believes that Jon would support him in any claim to the Iron Throne. He spoke despite not liking these words, and he thinks he will succeed. Olenna asked. He's saying there are strong indications that the Queen's children are not Baratheons, but he still has no proof and doesn't know who the father is yet. Loras spoke at that closed meeting. That's scandalous. Garland choked, while Willis frowned and Marjorie covered her mouth. Olenna seemed thoughtful, then decided to speak. If it's true, and he gets proof, I'm sure that Renly would be the best match for my granddaughter. She spoke, since the fool is so easy to manipulate that he would be a perfect puppet for the Tyrells. Meanwhile, Marjorie looked surprised at this and nodded, though she was uneasy with the idea of sharing a future husband with her brother. I want you to stay alert to all this and inform us, but for that we will have to wait for the current king to die somehow. But the way he drinks and prostitutes himself, it's very likely that this will happen soon. She spoke. They continued talking a bit more, mainly about logistics and about the construction Jon had given them the blueprints for. They were to build warehouses to store ice and products. Loras returned to Renly's room later, while the latter was eating grapes near the window. Prince Renly, Loras greeted. Loras, Renly murmured, smiling and looked towards the window. You know you can still see the giants from here. Willis commented, watching the Artican group disappearing on the horizon. Do you think we could trust them? Loras asked cautiously. I'm not absolutely sure, but I am confident we will form an unbeatable alliance. I might even offer Winterfell to him, and put Artica above my own crown too. Renly spoke dreamily. If Jon heard this, he would punch Renly in the face for the tasteless joke. Loras remained silent. Renly spoke again, looking at Loras this time. Any news from King's Landing? He asked. No, my prince. We haven't had ravens for over 5 days. He spoke as Renly nodded. He had sent some letters to King's Landing, while in a distant part of the castle, a raven was speeding towards Highgarden, with a symbol of King's Landing on its feet, continuing as it already spotted the castle landing on it. However, everything seemed normal when it was caught by a sudden thud as a bird grabbed it with its claws, and despite the raven's protests, it was killed shortly after, holding it to take to another location while dropping its body in a place that would not be found, and the eagle picked up the cord with its beak, bringing it to Jon the next moment. He saw the approach of one of his two birds while mounting his wolf, as it paid him by the arm, showing the scroll in its beak, and he smiled at it. "You did very well." Jon smiled after seeing its memories while stroking the eagle before taking the scroll. He unrolled it and began to read it after breaking the seal. It was a message from King's Landing about the order to put Jon Artica and his group of men into custody at the castle. A foolish plan, but they tried. These guys are persistent. This is the fourth letter in the last few days. Seems they already expected them to be intercepted. Jon mocked softly. He saw that the letter also mentioned a group of soldiers with a guard also coming. Jon would like to see them try to stop his group. "Anything we should worry about?" "My king," his royal guard spoke beside him. "Tell them we'll have someone to kill." Tormund shouted nearby, wanting some kind of action. "Maybe if they manage to catch us by the end of this path, then we'll have to wait. It's good that we've already managed to load the ships with the horses we bought and more thousands of animals that were placed days ago and are already moving out to the middle of the fleet at sea. We will now have little time to act in Hightower, so we'll see what they're capable of." Jon mocked again with his plan. "My king, what about the letter you let that child write?" the guard asked. "Well, we should inform some things. Since they have been without much communication for a long time, they might suspect something is wrong. So, I left that letter of what happened for the spy. Let's see what Varys will say in the meeting and how they will react to everything that happened." Jon commented, since King's Landing had been out of the loop about what was happening in Highgarden for more than a week. "It would be interesting to pass on some information. And the maesters of Oldtown, Jon? Do they know we are coming there?" Serena asked, a bit worried. "No, I sent my birds into the sky and they shot down all the ravens. I want to surprise them with an unexpected visit. So, we'll see how the maesters will receive us," Jon said, cracking a smile. He had the power to control all communication, if he wanted to, and a war without accurate information was a lost war. He would not let more ravens out, as happened with Sunspear, where it began the conversation of the maesters with the order. They continued their way, and for the next few days, a group with a royal guard, Ser Jaime Lannister, appeared on the road near Highgarden, startling all patrols and nobles passing through, while Jaime himself paid them no heed and headed straight for the castle. "What is this?" the Tyrells asked in surprise, and Renly Baratheon was the one who received them in the middle of the courtyard, curious about why a royal guard was coming here and what he was doing there without any announcement from King's Landing. Jaime approached as he saw Renly, standing there in the middle of the place, stopped his horse, dismounted, and bowed to Prince Renly, along with all the other soldiers who came from King's Landing. "Ser Jaime Lannister, how unexpected. What are you doing here?" Renly greeted with a smile, while Jaime frowned at that. "Didn't you receive the letters we sent here?" Jaime asked, still frowning, as they should have been aware of his presence. "I think not." Renly looked confusedly at Jaime. "There's an order coming," Jaime said, as Willis approached Renly, looking confused. "We haven't received any letters, Ser Jaime." Willis came up beside and spoke. "That's impossible. There is an order to arrest Jon Snow and take him for trial in King's Landing," he stated, and this immediately silenced the entire place. Ser Jaime harbored a certain anger towards the Starks, so he did not care to be respectful towards what he considered a wild king, and even though the order referred to Jon as Artica and not Snow. Jon Artica? Why? What is the accusation for him? To be arrested and tried? Renly was surprised by this and looked confused, as he was not aware of anything that could label him as a criminal. The Artican ships attacked numerous merchant ships in the Vale. The king demands his presence for a trial to find out what happened and to ask for compensation, Ser Jaime said. "Sorry, Ser Jaime, but Jon Artica left days ago after concluding all the trade contracts here." Willis was the one who spoke, and Jaime looked grim. "That's not possible. Only if he himself shot down the ravens with the order," Jaime muttered. Let's go after them. If he left a few days ago, he must not have reached the coast yet. Jaime ordered his men and quickly left before anyone could stop him, mounted his horse, and departed. This left everyone at the location confused. Not even Renly could stop Ser Jaime, despite being the prince, as this was the order of the king himself. He wanted to get this over with before returning to King's Landing and being beside the woman he loves again. A raven that Jon had released, a spy of Varys, departed in the last few days for King's Landing, and it finally arrived in the city on this very day, heading for the Red Castle and landing on the window of a man who was reading some scrolls from other ravens. Varys approached the raven, which exhibited none of the odd behavior he noted in others lately, and took the scroll from its leg and opened it before starting to read. He read the content and saw that it really was his spy in Highgarden, with whom he had no contact in the last week. And when he read, he was somewhat shocked by what he saw. He immediately left his office and went to the Hand's Tower, calling Jon Arryn to inform him about what is happening in the Reach. The man listened to him and read the letter a moment later, then left with a summons for an urgent council meeting, which happened shortly afterward. All council members were summoned and were heading to the meeting room. Even the king was informed, and Jon Arryn used words that attracted the king, mentioning that Ned's son participated in a jousting tournament in Highgarden and won. If you want to know the details, he would have to attend the meeting as well. Curious to know what Ned's son had done, the king quickly got out of bed, dismissed the prostitutes aside, and followed to the meeting room. They would soon have the meeting about what happened in the last few days in that kingdom. The king's council soon filled up with all members, with Robert entering last, still sleepy. "I need something to keep me awake for this," he exclaimed and went straight to the wine as usual, filling a glass for himself, taking a long sip, and then turning back to all the members who were staring at him at that moment. "We can begin. I want all the news of what happened in that kingdom." "But why haven't we received any ravens in the last few weeks?" Robert demanded. "Well, Your Grace, something happened because my little birds could not send any news. It is very likely they were captured," Varys commented with a sad and cautious look, while his gaze again searched the skies, always wary. He could not say that this meeting might be spied on by a sorcerer through birds and suggest they change the meeting place. After all, he would be deemed insane. "What incompetence!" Robert immediately exclaimed. "Perhaps we should change the Master of Whispers," he blurted out, taking another sip, while Jon gave Varys an apologetic look, knowing there was no way to find another Master of Whispers to replace Varys, and even if they could, Varys would be a threat with the network of information he possesses. Varys was not offended, or at least he made a very neutral face while listening to the king. "I apologize, Your Majesty," he began. "Then I will go straight to the subject of the news." He quickly caught the attention of Robert Baratheon, Jon Arryn, Stannis Baratheon, Cersei Baratheon, Grand Maester Pycelle, Peter Baelish, and Barristan Selmy, waiting for him to continue. There was a tournament that Jon Artica's group participated in, first with Jon Artica sending 2 representatives to the archery tournament. Varys began, with Robert raising an eyebrow in disappointment. "What? Ned's son didn't participate?" he exclaimed. "Yes and no, Your Grace," Varys said, and continued before the king could interrupt him, cursing him for the charade. "One of those participants was Arya Stark." He spoke. Ned's daughter. Robert was extremely surprised by this, knowing the girl must be about 10 or 11 name days. "Yes," Varys began. "Catelyn Stark will be furious when she finds out about this." Baelish spoke with a mocking tone. "That's so wild." Cersei also mocked. "No wonder she spent years beyond the wall. That's the behavior of a wildling." Stannis said nothing, maintaining a neutral face, as could be said of Selmy. Jon also remained silent without comments, but had disapproving eyes for such behavior. "Shut up, woman," Robert snapped at Cersei. "I'm interested in what the girl did. Tell me, Varys, what result did she achieve?" Robert was excited to see how Arya would fare in this tournament, although he did not expect her to do well. Varys sighed. "She finished the competition in 4th place, missing the target at 110 meters, he declared, and everyone immediately looked at him confused for a moment, trying to digest what they had just heard. "Wait a minute. Are you saying that Ned's youngest daughter hit a target at 100 meters and still took fourth place? Robert's eyes widened at this. She hit a target at 105 meters, Your Grace, Varys corrected him. The place fell silent for a while, until Robert burst into laughter, breaking the silence. Ha 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 ha! You're saying Ned's little girl hit a target at 105 meters. She's 10 named days, isn't she? He exclaimed joyfully, as he always does when he hears news of Ned's children. 11 named days, Your Grace, Varys said. That's incredible. How many archers can do that in Westeros? He asked openly. Few, Your Grace. Maybe about 100 of them, Selmy replied. You see, Jon, Ned has very good children. If Marcella could do something like this, I would be such a proud father. He couldn't help but murmur. Do you think our daughter would do something so wild? I refuse. Cersei growled, but Robert didn't care. I agree with the Queen, Your Grace. This activity is not for girls. Jon Arryn also disapproved of such behavior. It's hard to believe a girl could do this. Are you really sure about this? Stannis seemed skeptical about it. He couldn't imagine his daughter doing something like that. There are thousands of witnesses, my prince. You will hear about it in the coming moons. The girl is an unprecedented prodigy, he said as Stannis nodded. There was another representative from Artica. He won the tournament, I presume, Selmy commented. You are correct. The Articans have proven to be great warriors both in the training yard of Highgarden and in the tournament. The Artican named Eldrick won the tournament by hitting a target at 125 meters distance. He spoke while Robert whistled. We should invite them to our next tournament. I like to see such strength, Robert exclaimed. Don't forget, Robert, we must capture those wildlings for what they did with the trade ships from the Vale. Cersei snarled. I agree with the Queen, Your Grace, Baelish said, and Jon also nodded in support, neither of the last two wanting to ease any punishment that Jon Artica would have. Enough of this talk. I first want to know about the tournament. Tell me, Eunuch, I heard Ned's son won the tournament. I want to know the details. He exclaimed, and Varys nodded. As he fought in the joust, he is not a knight. This is a blasphemy against the Seven. Jon Arryn interrupted with a tone of disapproval. Prince Renly made a bet with Jon Artica in exchange for the Valyrian steel sword that is in possession of the Artican king, Varys commented. Dark Sister, Selmy seemed interested. The legendary sword of those damned dragons. Robert commented. Prince Renly argued that the sword belongs to him, so he made a proposal with Jon, betting lands on the coast of Stormlands with his champion, Loras Tyrell, Varys commented, and Robert seemed increasingly interested. Renly tried to take the sword for himself. It belongs to my Joffrey by right. Cersei immediately shouted. Shut up, woman. I want to hear the rest of the story, he said, though he already knew that Jon Artica wins the tournament. The tournament began, and the final ended up being between Jon Artica and Loras Tyrell. And as you know, the victory went to Jon Artica. There are some rumors that he can control animals, and this gave him the victory. Varys couldn't help but comment on this at the end. After all, he hated magic. Fanciful stories, Robert commented. But look at Ned's children. Damned be that bastard. Always having children who stand out. Even though one of them is a bastard, Robert commented joyfully, regardless of the current circumstances, he will always be proud of his foster brother. The wildling won the tournament, but the Tyrells kept them in custody? Cersei immediately asked after hearing such nonsense. I don't think so. When I received this letter, they reported that the Articans were preparing to depart, while Jon Artica was finishing his negotiations, Varys commented. What? We sent a royal order. It should have reached the Tyrells. Jon Arryn spoke sternly. The Tyrells are disobeying the crown. They are traitors, Cersei accused. I don't think that's it. Varys tried to clarify. It's like the letter never reached them. He said, We'll look into this later, and hope that Sir James can bring them under the custody of the crown. Jon Arryn interrupted, leaving that discussion for later. I want to know what resulted from these negotiations with the Tyrells. We know the Articans bought animals, metals, books, hired teachers, and even desert sand, as well as sold their own products in Dorne. Now what did they do? Jon Arryn asked. Before that, sorry to interrupt, did you find out why they took the sand? Baelish asked curiously. No, I don't know why they took so much sand to the north. Varys commented and continued. Yes, he again negotiated his products with the Reach. Varys began. Wait, he has to come here. I need his drinks too. Robert interrupted while everyone looked at him with their own thoughts. He just wanted more alcohol to drink in the end. Varys then continued. His negotiations with the Tyrell family were about buying a large amount of horses. He bought 8,000 in total, while 3,000 were already entering his ship and another 5,000 would be picked up later. Varys spoke. 8,000 horses. That's a good amount, Stannis commented. Yes, besides the horses, animals were bought, and metals again with some other resources from the Reach, Varys said. How much did he spend? Baelish asked. Over 1,000,000 golden dragons. Varys responded as the room fell silent again, stunned by that amount. The damn man is that rich? Didn't he already spend an exorbitant amount in Dorne? Robert exclaimed. Yes. We don't know how much Jon Artica has in his coffers beyond the wall, but he loaded his ships with gold, Varys commented. The north of the wall is a region never before explored. Who's to say there aren't gold veins as large as in the west? Stannis commented. Maybe the Lannisters aren't the richest, after all. Baelish commented, looking at the queen, who seemed quite offended by this, clenching her fists and teeth. Another reason to capture them and start a campaign beyond the wall. Cersei exclaimed, We are not starting a war over a few trade ships. Jon Arryn himself said this. Even though the attacked ships were from his kingdom, he wasn't foolish enough to start a war amidst a financial crisis in the crown, let alone in a land that even the North would be hesitant to enter. The risks were too great for a profit they were not even sure of. Their best chance was to bring Jon Artica to the capital and force him with the demands of the crown. Anyway, is there anything else interesting from the Reach? Baelish asked, though he agreed more with the queen than Jon. Well, there were a few more interesting things besides the trade and tournament. Varys began. This relates to Arya Stark, he said, and Robert immediately became interested. Something more about Ned's daughter? Robert exclaimed. Arya Stark stood out as a huge potential bride for all the nobles present from the Reach. He began. But she's a wildling, Cersei exclaimed. Shut up, woman. I won't listen to you insult the girl. Otherwise, you will be removed from this meeting. Robert spoke as he became increasingly drunk as the meeting progressed. Cersei was frustrated, but she kept quiet. She stood out not only in the tournament, but she made friendships with all the great ladies at the tournament, knowing how to behave like a true lady and showing great intelligence, he said. Intelligence. Baelish seemed interested. Yes, my spies heard some news that Arya and even the Artican queen possess great knowledge, speaking other languages to communicate among themselves without anyone hearing. And Arya showed she had a sharp mind when questioned by a maester, leaving them even speechless, he said. Really? The girl can do that? Robert now seemed skeptical like the others. Yes, she has become a potential target, in addition to her extreme blossoming beauty, which many saw surpassing even the garden's own flower, Marjorie Tyrell, he said. Maybe she takes after her mother. Baelish said with a smile. Beautiful and intelligent. Ned told me she was very much like Lyanna, and I remember when I visited Winterfell many years ago, and he wasn't lying. So that's obvious, Robert said to himself, lost in memories of the time he had his fiancée. Cersei heard this and turned red with the mention. Lyanna was a wound to her pride, first seeing that Rhaegar chose Lyanna at that contest. Even though he was married, it was she who should have received the tournament crown. And to complete her affliction, even Robert, who on their first night together, he called out for this dead woman, and he never lost his passion for her even after a decade and a half. Cersei was also frustrated with other things, but said nothing after what she heard from Robert. She knew he would remove her, but her thoughts were anything but calm at that moment. Why are these wildlings standing out so much? Shouldn't it be her son, the true king of Westeros, to be acclaimed in the realms? Not a wildling from the north, she exclaimed internally. Shouldn't it be her sweet daughter being coveted in this way? Why are these Starks considered more by everyone than her own lions? She thought frustratedly. Someone younger will come along. A voice appeared in the queen's mind at that moment, leaving her trembling inside. Someone younger will come along and take everything that belongs to you. The voice of that which echoed again, while Cersei trembled without anyone noticing. She still remembered going to the forest to see that prophecy, and she believed in it. After all, everything the witch said came true. Could it be this little brat? She exclaimed internally. So this would be the queen who will replace me and take everything from me? Younger and more beautiful? I will kill her before she enchants my son. She murmured quietly to herself, unheard by anyone. If she was desperate there, what she began to hear made her even more dazed. Jon, I have an idea. If Ned's daughter is so coveted, I want you to send a letter to Ned, proposing an engagement between Arya Stark and my heir. He exclaimed. What? Cersei shouted, drawing everyone's attention, and she spoke with a venomous tone. You're going to give our son to a wildling? She snarled, not caring about Robert's previous threat. Leave this room immediately, woman. I don't want to hear you speak ill of the girl again. He exclaimed. Ser Selmy, accompany the queen out of this room. He commanded, and the knight nodded. Cersei looked at the king with a deadly gaze, clenching her teeth like never before. I hope you listen to me, Robert. If you marry our daughter to this girl, I will make you regret it, I swear. She exclaimed and started to leave with Selmy accompanying her, while everyone was surprised by her outburst. What's gone into this woman? Robert was at a loss for words. I don't know, Your Majesty, but you should think very carefully before proposing something like this. Jon spoke and continued. Arya Stark spent years beyond the wall. Many will see our future king having a wild queen. He said, I want a marriage between my family and that of Ned. Isn't the girl intelligent and beautiful? Besides using a bow, maybe she'll put my useless son in his proper place. Robert exclaimed, now seeing an incredible opportunity to marry the two families and unite them. Your Grace, Lady Catelyn Stark expects it to be her oldest daughter. Sansa, Baelish commented. The younger daughter seems much more suitable to be a queen, and she still looks like Lyanna. If I can't marry her, at least my son will. Robert exclaimed, not knowing how Cersei was planning to do everything to stop this, even going to the king's chamber and driving out all the prostitutes there to wait for him and try to seduce him. But without knowing this, Robert continued. Pycelle sent a letter to Ned. I want you to write about his daughter Arya and the interest in seeing his youngest daughter as a potential match for my eldest son. Robert exclaimed. Pycelle, who had been silent the whole time, nodded to the king's demand without questioning. Very well, I will do that, Your Majesty. He said, that's great. Now let's wait and see what Ned does and hope that Jon Artica is brought to the capital with Arya. I want to see the girl personally before approving her. As always, there were some eyes hidden from everyone's view at that meeting, while Jon listened to everything hidden, even with Varys being quite attentive to spot anything and looking up from time to time to find him. The man always seemed cautious to say anything because he always had the impression that he was being listened to. Back in the Reach, the Artican group's journey to the coast lasted a few more days while Jon finally saw the coastal city ahead. My king. A group of Artican soldiers came out of Oak Garden and greeted them on the road as soon as they saw him through their wargs. It's good to see you. Jon greeted them while looking at least 40 ships still in the harbor. How are things? He asked. All the requested horses are at sea. We're just finishing up gathering the last of the livestock. He said, and Jon nodded. That's good, but our friend will soon catch up to us like this. Jon commented. Should I defeat them, my king? One of the royal guards asked, and Jon shook his head. No, I want to do it myself. We'll have to wait for them outside the city. After all, it would cause us many problems there, so we'll catch them here and plan to leave as if nothing had happened. Jon shared his thoughts, while everyone around nodded in agreement. He had a plan, and even if it could make him an enemy of Westeros, he would proceed, since the consequences would be minimal. He had set his 2 hawks to fly over Highgarden and exterminate all the ravens, leaving the place without communication in the last few days. Have you prepared the birds? Jon asked as a cart was brought with many birds he had purchased, bird from the Reach. He began to bond with all of them and release them. His objective was simple, to hunt all the ravens coming in and out of Oldtown, needing to isolate the entire city. After all, he was going to make the visit that the maesters and Lord Hightower wanted. Jon watched the 30 eagles flying south before turning back to his men. Now let's wait for Sir James to come. I want to see if his reputation with the sword is as good as they imagine. Jon advised, and they prepared for the ambush. Sir Jaime continued riding with his group towards the coast as he saw ships being loaded, some departing. There are still ships in the city. Let's take them. Jaime ordered as he spurred his horse into a gallop. My lord, we can face them. Have you heard about the giants? One of the men commented fearfully as the others looked on in fear. They were few against a huge group, and none had the courage that Sir Jaime Lannister was showing at that moment. Stop being cowardly. We'll just assess the situation. If we can capture Jon Artica, that will be enough. We'll just run to the capital after the capture. Jaime spoke. He wasn't going to pressure Jon Artica immediately, but he wanted to assess the situation and see his options. They continued until someone appeared out of the trees and stopped in the middle of the road, which made Jaime go from surprised to stunned as soon as he saw who was waiting for him. After all, this was his foe. So you're after me, Sir Jaime? Jon commented, looking at the group with a smile. Sir Jaime, like everyone there, immediately stopped and stared at the man, stunned, while he wore an Elden metal armor, crossed his arms, and waited for them to approach calmly. Everyone, get off the horse, Sir Jaime ordered as his men dismounted, while he looked at Jon, placing his hand on his sword. Jon remained silent, looking at the men with an amused glint. You are Jon Artica. We are here under the order of the King of Westeros to arrest you and take you for trial at the capital, Sir Jaime said as the men by his side drew their sword from their scabbards and looked at Jon cautiously. Really? But unfortunately, he is not my king, and I do not have to go to a trial. Do you think we of Artica are servants of Westeros? Jon asked with a dangerous tone. Then you are arrested. Besides, you shouldn't be here alone. What happened to your men? Jaime taunted, drawing his sword from his waist, believing he would easily win this battle. Are you going to kill me? Regicide. Jon taunted back, maintaining his smile. He would no longer try to dialogue with these people. It's time for Westeros to be put in its place. Do you think I cannot, bastard? Jaime was offended by that and became equally aggressive. Funny to hear that from someone who has 3 bastard children in the capital. Jon ended up saying, leaving Jaime completely stunned, while the men looked at each other behind Jaime, surprised by the idea that Jaime Lannister has bastard children. I don't know what you're talking about, Jaime exclaimed with a dark tone, looking at Jon with an intent to kill. I might be talking nonsense, Sir Jaime. After all, I saw that woman getting cozy even with the king's squire for some favors. Jon continued mocking. Lies! Jaime immediately shouted at the height of his fury. You're just a fool. Let's start this, but first, Jon said as he drew his sword, and the men seemed reluctant while Jon stood there showing total confidence in front of those people without a trace of fear despite the numerical disadvantage. Anyone would find this highly suspicious. Jon didn't care and continued. First, let's deal with the other participants, he declared, and the men felt a movement to the side. Before being struck by kicks from their own horses, each hoof in their chest sent them flying away. What? Jaime was alarmed to say the least, scared, as he watched dozens of men being knocked down by their own horses, even making him look at his own, while he immediately distanced himself from it. But the animal was the only one doing nothing. Don't worry, I won't attack you that way. Just wanted to make us a bit more alone, Jon said as he watched dozens of men fall to the ground, mostly unconscious, while those who remained awake were attacked again by the horses until they finally fell. The sound of people screaming and the thuds of horses trampling their own was heard on that road as Jon calmly looked on, and Jaime grew even more frightened. You, he accused Jon while keeping his gaze between him and the horses, which did not seem hostile to him at the moment. You, I have some interesting abilities. I like these horses, so I intend to take them for myself. I hope you don't mind. Jon spoke, maintaining a smile. So if it's true, you're a sorcerer? Jaime accused him, seeing that the stories he hadn't quite believed at the council were indeed real. I am a warg. The blood of the first men runs in my veins, Sir Jaime Lannister. Jon spoke with an arrogant tone and continued. I've faced the Red Viper, Sir Garland, and many knights of the Reach in the courtyard of Highgarden. Let's see if you also possess the reputation that precedes you, Kingslayer. Jon spoke as he drew Dark Sister. Jaime no longer had the confidence he had before, since one thing is to face a swordsman, whom he believed he could defeat in Jon with that, but a sorcerer with a bunch of horses that could attack him? Come on, lover of the Queen of Westeros, Jon taunted, wanting to confront the man, but he seemed no longer confident and wanted to enrage him to have a better will to fight. Or should I say, one of her lovers. Jon finished. Shut your damn mouth, you bastard. Jaime shouted again, gaining fury as he took the initiative, leaving the horses behind and advanced towards Jon. Jon easily parried the man's sword as he made a horizontal cut on the right side. Jaime had to make an effort, surprised by Jon's reaction speed. His blade clashed against Jon's as he felt the weight of Jon's strike, taking a few steps back while spinning his sword to counterattack, until it could not move much before colliding with Jon's blade again. You are a great swordsman, but by the standards of Westeros, Jon said as he pushed Jaime to the opposite side, who frowned while visibly losing the fight. He tried to attack again, while Jon kept his sword parrying his, as they exchanged blows on that road, with no sign of a single soul beyond the horses and men fallen on the ground. Why does the king have to fight against these weak people? A dwarf murmured in the distance, as they watched the fight through a magnifying glass. He wants to see how the greatest swordsmen of Westeros fight, and he gave the order not to interfere and not let anyone pass through the roads. An Articano spoke while they were limiting the road to the port city, and there were giants emerging from the other side of the road, blocking the passage of any peasant or merchant passing there. Another royal knight. This group is so weak. An Articano man mocked. Meanwhile, Jon and Jaime continued the fight. Jaime was increasingly frustrated, beginning to exchange his anger for a feeling of helplessness. What the hell are you? He yelled as a 15-year-old boy who shouldn't have this speed and strength was toying with him. I'm just what I should be, Regicide, but unfortunately, you will not be able to defeat this king, Jon declared as he began to get more aggressive, making Sir Jaime retreat step by step, until his blade flew from his hand the next moment, leaving Jaime completely open, and Jon simply struck him with the pommel of the sword on his head, making him fall unconscious the next moment. Well, I'm done here. Jon spoke and took the body of Sir Jaime with his sword, before placing him lying on one of the horses while Jon mounted the other. You are free. Jon gave a last order to the remaining horses, and they began to run to the forest, leaving just a group of men lying unconscious. My king! A group of royal guards greeted him as soon as he approached. Let's take him with us. Prepare all the ships to depart, Jon spoke. After all, he had completed the first batch negotiated with Reach on this day, free to leave from there. Yes, the giants are already coming from the other side of the road. He warned, and Jon nodded before placing Jaime in a place that would not be seen by the city, and they continued going to the port with the complete group. The city seemed quite busy with the last ships leaving there, while a small group waited for Jon as they passed through the city and were bid farewell by the local family, Florahart, whom Jon met on the first day he stepped into this kingdom. Junran Florahart was nervous beside his mother. Even though she was pregnant, Jon remembered that this family had tried to speak with him, but had not managed to, as Jon had to pay attention to major negotiators and nobles of the tournament. It seemed they had received a letter from Lord Florahart to treat them well. Not that they weren't already, but the woman's disdainful gleam from the first day was no longer there. After exchanging just a few words with them, Jon proceeded to the ship along with his family and his new prisoner, while no one had seen him, and people would wonder what happened when they heard about a group of knights from the royal port fallen on the road. The ships began to leave the port, and a few hours later he was in the middle of the fleet with 150 ships. Jon looked from the prow at the huge group of ships, which had probably been partying in the last weeks waiting for orders. Did anyone try to intercept them then? Jon asked amusingly to one of the captains in charge of the fleet while he was outside. Yes, my lord. Ships from Oldtown with maesters, even a Lannister ship. The man spoke. Interesting. We have plans to visit both places again. Jon spoke with a smile. He had Jaime Lannister, so going west would be quite interesting. However, that would have to wait. After all, he had an interesting thing to do. Let's head south. It's time we visited Oldtown. Jon ordered as all his men began to move their fleet towards the south of the Reach. Jon, were you planning? Am I participating? Arya, being a perceptive girl, asked immediately as the ship continued to head south at high speed over the next few days while the men seemed to be preparing for a war. I plan to do some things, but you will not participate, Jon spoke with a stern tone. But, she tried to argue. Look, Arya, I need someone to stay to take care of Serena. I trust you to take care of her and my son, Jon said, touching the girl's head. Okay, Arya spoke with a tone of dissatisfaction, but nodded in the end. Jon didn't want to risk Serena in this. After all, they were going to commit a great act as Westeros. But Jon wanted to do this even if he lost his negotiations. He had done his part, but he had to show that these kingdoms had to fear him too besides him bringing opportunities. Days passed, and ravens began to arrive in the more distant kingdoms, one of which was located in the far north. It was a morning in Winterfell, while Lord Stark was eating with his family. He had been waiting in recent days for new messages from the south while he heard last week that Jon and Arya were in the Reach, being received by the Tyrells to negotiate some things he still didn't know. But he was sure that Jon would do the same as what happened with Dorne. His wife was not very pleased with this, even saying that Jon wanted to create ties with southern families to take over Winterfell, as always in recent years, or that Arya had become some kind of wildling. Everything seemed peaceful as he ate with his family, and this was interrupted by Maester Luwin appearing with a worried and cautious face. What is it, Maester Luwin? Lord Stark looked at the man curiously. Ravens, my lord, from the south. He spoke, and Ned quickly understood. Let's go to my solar. Lord Stark requested to not talk about it in front of his family, although everyone already knew what it was about. I'll go too, Catelyn quickly exclaimed. She wanted to know about her daughter and would not let this pass. Ned thought about it for a bit. All right, but I don't want to hear you speaking ill of Jon and offending him. Otherwise you will leave there and leave us in peace. Ned warned with a stern tone, and despite Catelyn clenching her teeth, she nodded. Their children also looked on with curious eyes, wanting to know about their sister and some about Jon, but remained silent. After all, Ned only spoke things after discussing the events. They proceeded to his office, where only Lord Stark, Catelyn, and Maester Luwin remained. Tell me, Maester, what are the news? The man asked. The Maester seemed to take a deep breath under the watchful eyes of his lords looking intently before beginning. He picked up a stack of parchment that had arrived that night. Here are dozens of parchments sent from the Reach, and even from King's Landing. Most of them are about marriage proposals. He said, Marriage proposal? Catelyn seemed surprised. Yes, there are many from the Reach, even from the Tyrells themselves for your heir. However, none of them stand out in comparison to the king's proposal. He wants to negotiate for your youngest daughter for his heir. He spoke cautiously, leaving Ned Stark with wide eyes. You're saying the king wants Arya to be the future queen? Catelyn shouted, alarmed by this, not realizing that her voice quickly passed the walls, being heard by guards and servants passing by. Calm down, Cat. Let me see this letter, Ned requested while Maester Luwin took one of the parchments with the royal seal and placed it in the hand of his lord. Is this really true, Ned? Is this not some kind of joke? Catelyn exclaimed with concern. She didn't know what to feel now. After all, she knew one of her daughters would be queen, but she had prepared Sansa for this. Now it was her youngest daughter who was being proposed for this royal marriage, especially a daughter she couldn't raise and impart the teachings of the Seven. This, Ned continued reading with quite a surprise. Robert really is interested in marrying Arya with his son. He talks about some things Arya did in the Reach and believes she could be the best daughter-in-law. Ned murmured, How can this be happening? Catelyn murmured, not knowing what to say about this. My lady, your daughter is the most sought-after single lady at the moment. Most of these letters are proposals for her. Various lords from the Reach and Dorne are interested in this engagement. Maester Luwin commented, while Catelyn didn't know whether to feel proud or worried. I'm not surprised. Arya has shown herself to be a very intelligent woman, which has led to much admiration, and she is learning commerce with Jon, participating in meetings where he negotiates his products. Ned spoke. "She should be here, Ned," Caitlin said with a bit of fury. "Yes, but you also can't complain. You always said she wouldn't arrange a marriage after going beyond the wall. Now look at her." Lord Stark spoke. "Let me see that." She requested one of the letters, the one from the Tyrells, as she quickly read the lines and frowned a few times while smiling at some. She really has become as beautiful as the letters describe her. Caitlin couldn't help commenting with a small smile, seeing that her Arya still had hope, but she frowned in the end. She participated in a tournament. "That is not at all suitable for a lady," she exclaimed. "Yes, you might be right, but look at the amount of admiration she received. She hit a target over 100 meters. Even Robb can't do that." Lord Stark spoke with a tone of admiration. "I won't speak of your son, but I demand that he bring her here." Caitlin immediately requested afterward. "I'm trying to get in touch with Jon. I sent some men from the north to deliver a message to Jon." Lord Stark spoke, but knew it would not be successful. After all, Jon might be departing at that moment. The king still maintains order after what his ships did. Arya could go to King's Landing. Caitlin resumed talking to her husband. "Yes, Jon's ships attacked some from the Vale. Even Lord Manderley tried to make contact, but was ignored by the ships as they continued north. Ned spoke, having received a message last week that the ships had passed the wall and disappeared from the sight of the Night's Watch on the coast. "Please, Ned, I want my daughter back," Caitlin said with a frustrated and sad tone, and Ned could understand her, for he too wanted Arya back at home. "We will have her back. I'm sure of it, Cat," Ned said, and they continued discussing these marriages for a while until Caitlin left some time later. Ned continued talking with Maester Luwin about what Jon was doing and his concern with the royal order. They sent a royal guard, and none other than Jaime Lannister, to capture Jon. Luwin commented, "This worries me. After all Jon's actions, he will not be captured so easily." Ned spoke. "This will only worsen his situation," Maester Luwin remarked, unaware of how Jon had already captured Tywin's own son as a hostage, while sailing with him unconcerned with the consequences. "I hope Jon does not cause any more trouble." Ned still worried about Jon and did not want him to become an enemy of the crown. But little did he know that the next news he would hear about Jon would nearly give him a heart attack. In the following days, the news that Arya would become the future queen spread like wildfire after hearing Caitlin shout in the solar. "This can only be a lie. There's no way anyone would be interested in that horse face." Jane Poole spoke to a very stunned and discouraged Sansa amid the rumors. She could never have imagined that her sister would be queen and not her, and it didn't help with Bran asking every time if Arya would be the queen of Westeros. She would become a queen in the future, but not of Westeros. The days went by while Oldtown had a common routine day. Fishermen went out to sea from the port, seeking to bring back many fish to sell and sustain their families. The port was filled with ships coming from Lannisport, Starfall, and other places in Dorne. Even merchants from the Vale and Essos filled the docks, seeking to sell their goods and buy items to resell on their lands. Everything seemed normal, but one conversation was quite debatable among the sailors and people in bars and on the docks. "Have you heard about the rumors?" someone asked in a nook in a tavern in front of the fisherman's port. The place reeked of fish, but these people were already used to it. This person had just spoken to a man in front of him, who had returned from his days at sea while fishing and had brought a good quantity. He ended up meeting an acquaintance, and they went to this place to drink. "What? Are you going to talk about the Northern Fleet passing through these waters weeks ago? I heard they are in Highgarden, and the nobility treated them very well," the fisherman said. "It's not just that." The opposite man leaned closer to his companion. He looked at his cup before continuing. "Waitress, bring me another cup of alcohol," he requested as a young woman nodded from the counter, going to the barman to get more drinks. "For me too," the second man said, drinking the rest of his cup to have it refilled as well. "Continue," he urged. "So, some merchants arrived." He began to speak while the young woman approached to refill their cups. The man waited until she withdrew, but not before slapping her on the butt. The young woman looked at him surprised and gave a small smile. Later, the man said, as this woman was the local prostitute. "You're worthless if your wife catches you doing that again." The first man remarked. "Fuck it, just continue," the second man insisted. So, some merchants were talking that they found them on the other end of the continent and saw the ships passing by like a horse passes a mule. They say their ships are so fast and powerful. Moreover, there are rumors that no pirate survived once they decided to attack them. They say they eliminate anything on the sea. Stepstone is on its knees to this fleet. Several coastal cities, and even cities dominated by pirate groups, have ordered no one to attack them unless they want to be among those who disappeared. He explained. His friend looked at him for a moment, then took a sip and responded to what he heard. "I didn't see the fleet, but boats that got close saw and described them as you heard too, but it's kind of exaggerated this story that they eliminate everyone on the sea." One of the maesters approached and talked to the Articans, but they refused to enter the city and went to Highgarden, the man said. "TSK. I heard the Septons saying they are savages who need to be purified. Do you believe the stories about giants on their ships?" the man asked. "They are northern savages, of course. They don't follow the seven. They are heretics, and about the giants. I'll only believe it when I see it. It's too much to believe in such things," he mocked. This kind of discussion became the talk at Oldtown port, with some claiming they saw the fleet and actually saw giants, while others mocked, not believing much in what they heard. Some Septons were preaching at the port, saying things about the fleet, with most people being scared and believing they were dealing with cruel savages and heretics. However, people could draw their own conclusions because some ships leaving Oldtown encountered a huge fleet stopped in the middle of the sea at that moment, after some leaving Oakgarden. Jon watched the ships fleeing in the distance and gave a small smile. He turned back to his men who were looking at him at that moment. "Let's prepare the ships. I want 500 men ready to enter Oldtown. Let's talk first. After all, I don't want to be accused of starting the aggression. Once they give us enough reason, we will act." "The city has been without communication in recent days," Jon said, feeling his birds flying over the entire city, hunting ravens throughout the region, whether they were arriving or leaving, without anyone noticing, while keeping the letters in a safe place. "Jon," Serena approached with the eyes of a woman worried about her husband. "It will be all right," Jon said, consoling her, and decided to first visit his prisoner, as he hadn't spoken to him since capturing him. He walked through the corridors below the ship and followed the path until he found a man in a cell. Jaime Lannister was not in his best condition as he looked at the person approaching, being the only one who hadn't brought food here. "So, Lannister, I hope you had a good stay these past few days." Jon began, while the man glared at him with some frustration. "I can't complain about the food," he murmured. After all, he was receiving excellent food, being Artican. "Well, I have no intention of letting my prisoner die. After all, you are worth a lot," Jon said, maintaining a smile. The man looked at him with an even greater gleam of frustration. "What did you do with the horses? Are you really a wizard or something?" he murmured. "Thank you for the compliment, but not exactly, although I can create a bit of magic," Jon said while a flame was created in his hand, much more powerful than what he used to make to light campfires when he was 8 or 9 named days old. Although this was totally useless to him, and he no longer used any of it. Jaime looked at the flame in his hand, illuminating the cell with wide eyes, but remained silent until he started to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. And what do you plan to do with me?" He seemed to be a man conscious of things he didn't understand and found his situation funny in the end. Jon extinguished the flames. "You know, Sir Jaime Lannister, I came to Westeros intending to negotiate with you, open businesses, and make both kingdoms prosper," he began. "But it seems I noticed how rotten you are since leaving Artica. Maybe I thought you would be like the North, but I should have known you would be different given your history. And even though I had already known King's Landing before, I have never seen a council as rotten as the one there," Jon said. Jaime looked at Jon with confusion, first because he said he had been there before, and second for claiming he knew, but the latter seemed quite understandable after seeing what he did with the horses. "So the wizard spies on us," he mocked. "Oh yes, I saw some rather eye-catching things, like your children passing for royal children," Jon mocked. Jaime seemed speechless at this. What could he do, lie? I know they are yours. You're not the only one who sleeps with the queen. Jon mocked. Lies. Jaime immediately exclaimed, believing it was just to provoke him. So he did not believe those words. His sister would never sleep with another man. Anyway, let's get down to business. Westeros has become unviable for negotiation, and even if I lose my deals, I did my part and already got the horses I was looking for, as I didn't even believe I could get a better quality of mount in Essos, and now I can produce them easily in Artica. As for the sand, I can negotiate in Essos. Jon said and continued, Now I need metal, and your father will pay for your ransom. Jon said, That is no problem for him. Jaime said, staring at Jon's strange eyes, Did you sell me for being a mage or for skills? He couldn't help but ask in the end. I don't need to control animals to win a sword fight. You can ask that to your colleague in the white cloak. After all, I left him in a very critical state. I doubt he will be the same as before. Jon said, Ser Boros Blunt? Well, I didn't see him with Renly, and I didn't have time to ask. Jaime murmured, I will leave that for you to talk with him. I want you to write a letter to your father, and for now, Jon said, taking him out of his cell, you will be transferred to another ship. I might even let you loose until delivering you to Lannisport. Jon said while Jaime was surprised with Jon releasing his chains. Do you have confidence that I won't stab you in the back? Jaime asked, and Jon mocked. You are in an advantageous position, Ser Jaime. I don't think you will mess it up. Jon began, and I doubt you could do much against the Articans. They might prove you are not as skilled as you suggest. So feel free to challenge them on the ship you will stay on, however. Jaime finally got out his chains and stood up, but he couldn't react when Jon grabbed him by the neck and lifted him like a rag doll easily. If by any small chance, even a very, very small chance, you step out of line, Jon's voice was no longer calm, and Jaime looked at him with wide eyes while struggling to breathe, trying to free Jon's hand from his neck. I don't care if you're a Lannister or who your father is. I will kill you and still intend to burn Lannisport. Enough of acting like a merchant in this kingdom. You on the Royal Council have given me good reasons to start becoming enemies, and believe me, this is a fight you will not win. Jon said before dropping Ser Jaime Lannister to the floor, leaving him gasping for air. His gaze returned upward where Jon was now waiting with a diplomatic smile, and Jaime couldn't help but tremble in his heart at that. Perhaps he was dealing with a monster, and they had given him a good reason to start showing his fangs. A moment later, Jon walked onto the ship's deck with Jaime following. Follow me, Ser Jaime. You will stay on the ship with many dwarves, so I hope you don't mind them singing and drinking a lot. Jon said as a dwarf looked at Ser Jaime, scrutinizing him. Very skinny. Maybe we can fix that. You might even become a strong man. The dwarf mocked Jaime, who raised an eyebrow, unable to help but remember his brother Tyrion, though this dwarf was much bolder. Jaime said nothing but turned to Jon. Where are we? Jaime looked at the movement of the ships. Some seemed to be leaving, but Jaime still couldn't see the return to Oldtown, so it was understandable. You don't exactly need to know, so just enjoy your journey and don't forget the letter. A man will ask for it to put it on a raven prepared to find your father. Jon said, and the royal guard of Westeros could do nothing but begin to follow the dwarf to the other ship across a plank, looking around with curiosity and a more cautious look at the giants he passed while they stared back at him. Jon returned to his cabin, where he began to prepare, donning his armor to get ready to go to the city, and went out to bid farewell to his sister and wife. Let's go, Jon said, leaving the official ship and heading to one of the 10 that would depart. There were 500 Articans there, including 12 giants and 100 dwarves, with the rest being soldiers, ready to face anything in that city. The ships then approached the coast as the city began to appear on the horizon, with its lighthouse illuminating slightly due to it being midday, while their ships announced their presence to the rest of the sea. The ships that had already seen the fleet before should have heard about their presence on the high seas, and seeing some of them coming to the city made the port even more agitated. Look, someone pointed from a port. It's them. They really came to the city. Another fisherman said, I'm not staying here. A merchant immediately gave the order, fearing that group after all the rumors, while his ship's sailors began to prepare the ship. Will we see giants? Other people seemed quite excited about it. Yes, now we can see if they are really real. Another said, the heretics are coming. We must purify them. A septon at the port began to shout, while some faith militants nodded. The city was not left behind, as people screamed, running through the streets. The Articans are coming. The Articans are coming. People exclaimed as the city seemed to go on alert, closing their shops and barricading their houses, as if something big was about to happen in this city. After all, they knew that most would be hostile to them. Meanwhile, in the castle connected to the great lighthouse, Lord Hightower's brother looked surprised when his soldiers announced the sighting of Artican ships at sea. He could already hear the agitated city as he walked to the window and saw the 10 ships approaching the port. So my brother managed to convince them to come here as he reported, but why didn't he send any ravens or respond to my messages asking for advice? After all, I am taking care of his city while he is having fun at the Tyrell's tournament. The man was a bit confused, but he looked at his men. Let's send a messenger to receive them and prepare to close the city. He spoke immediately, as his objective was to take Jon Artica hostage. Even without knowing what had happened in the Vale, they already had their own plan, while Jon could hear everything with a bird hidden near the window. Elsewhere, the same agitation was happening in the Citadel. Finally, they are here. We must bring him here immediately, so he can't call for help, the Grand Maesters commented. Meanwhile, one Grand Maester among them frowned, not liking any of this. I must help him somehow, the Maester thought internally. He seemed to be someone who did not see Jon and Artica with the same eyes as his colleagues. Call the High Septon as well. Let's put pressure on them as lords who control this entire realm, a Grand Maester said, and the others nodded as they began to prepare to ambush the Artican king, believing they had total power over them. But this is strange. We haven't seen any ravens in the past few days, and we haven't received any ravens from Highgarden in the last week, one of the men said. That doesn't matter now. We have our chance to act here. He spoke while everyone prepared. Jon looked at the city approaching closer. Well, they surely must be expecting us. So let's level the playing field, Jon said, raising his hand towards the forest and letting his power flow like never before. In the city, as everything seemed agitated, dogs, cats, snakes, and all kinds of animals seemed to lift their eyes at that moment, as if they were being called for something, but they did not move. They just seemed to nod to a force controlling them at that moment, while Jon's birds continued circling the city without arousing suspicion of anything very strange happening there. The ships finally arrived at the port, and many merchants began to leave it at the same time, fearing the Artican ships. The Articans started taking over the docks, with a large crowd of curious onlookers, something common in the cities where Jon passed since leaving Artica. Everyone saw only 10 ships, finally preparing with the terrifying sight of giants in closed armor, with men and dwarves equally armed, disembarking from the ships and preparing for their stay in the city. Artican King. Jon disembarked from his ship under everyone's gaze as a man in armor with the Hightower symbol approached with respect, despite the disdain in his eyes. My lord, brother of the head of House Hightower, invites you to his home, the man said, but before anyone could respond, a new man appeared. Sorry, but Lord Hightower will have to wait, as the Citadel is aware of your interest in buying books from the library, and our council is available to negotiate at this moment. A maester approached and interrupted. But lord, the man still tried to obey his lord. Jon saw how they had not planned anything together and laughed internally before speaking. Sorry, but I believe that negotiating with the Citadel is more important, Jon said while the maester smiled at this, and the man looked a bit upset but nodded. Come, Artican King, I am sure you will be very satisfied with our negotiations, the man said while Jon smiled at him. I'm sure of it, Jon said, smiling and looking at the man who had great malice against him, but they would see who would laugh in the end. The group began to move, with most of the soldiers following Jon alongside the giants, intimidating the entire crowd. Some stayed at the port to guard the ships, including giants, all prepared for the conflict that could arise there. Everyone wore false smiles, whether it was Jon or the Maesters. Each was plotting against the other. The walk to the Citadel was an opportunity for Jon to see how this city stood compared to what he had witnessed in his green vision. Despite little change, some even tried to curse him, calling him a heretic, but as soon as the first one shouted, the giant grabbed him, scaring everyone. "What is this?" The Maester was a bit frightened, seeing the man being lifted by the giant's hands and suspended in the air. "Do you want to negotiate?" "If that's the case, I'm leaving," Jon said to see what the Maester would do. "I apologize for this, Artican King," he said in an apologetic tone and looked at the man. "Soldiers, take this man and flog him with 50 lashes." The Maester ordered as the man was taken away, screaming after being dropped by one of the giants. "We are almost there," the Maester said after a while, walking further through the city, with a cautious look at the giant after what he had seen. Jon looked at the citadel ahead with satisfaction, as his plan was to plunder this place and start building the largest library in the world in Artica. Meanwhile, Artican ships had already disembarked on the northern coast while no one noticed, as they had done so the previous night, taking advantage of the darkness. After all, Jon would not miss having his own element of surprise once the chaos began. Jon continued with his group, and as they reached the last houses on the closed streets, someone suddenly stumbled out of an alley and fell in front of him. The sound of clashing metal links accompanying the cloaked man's crash to the ground. The man fell before Jon as his royal guards positioned themselves between Jon and the man. "Ah!" Jon could hear the man's moan of pain, with the man being of not so young an age. "It's all right," Jon said as he approached the man, feeling he should help him, stepping past the royal guard and taking the man by the arm. "Archmaester Marwyn, what do you think you're doing here like this? You should be at the university, and how can you be so clumsy?" The Maester accompanying Jon exclaimed, displeased by the disaster this Maester had caused. "I apologize. I'm overwhelmed with tasks. I apologize, King Jon Artica." He spoke as they quickly stood up and left the spot to return to the university. Jon watched him walk away with a raised eyebrow, and they continued on their way, but without Jon looking at the paper Archmaester Marwyn had left in his hand. "It's a trap." Jon read the paper in his mind and smiled. It seemed not all maesters were corrupt in this city. They continued walking after that, as he tucked the message away, not caring much. After all, he expected this. They finally emerged into the open area in front of the Citadel, a massive structure. Hundreds of people who were in the Citadel came out to see the giants arriving with Jon, as they were greeted by a small group of maesters. "King of the North, these are our grand maesters, the minds behind the entire Citadel." The maester who accompanied them spoke as Jon looked at each. "It's an honor to see you here, Monarch of the North. I've heard many stories about you. You are certainly unique in person, not disappointing in any aspect." The one in the center spoke, approaching Jon, but he greeted him without any physical contact, maintaining his respect from a distance. Jon knew this man seemed to be the leader here and was one of the more unlikable ones, but Jon just maintained a nod. "I'm surprised you've heard about me in this place." "Maester," Jon murmured. "He is Archmaester Vorian, the one who commands the Citadel and the Order of Maesters." The maester accompanying Jon said, correcting Jon, but he could see that he was dissatisfied with Jon calling him maester. "That's all right. I'm not as well known as our guest, so it's fine." The man spoke in a calm tone, though not fully hiding his dissatisfaction, while Jon maintained a calm smile for it now. "Very well. Then Lord Hightower told me to come here since you invited me for a negotiation while I'm quite interested in the books you have." Jon spoke. "Yes, of course. Why don't you follow me? You could bring at most 10 guards. We are men who sharpen our minds and not blades, so we do not resort to violence. And I doubt the Citadel can accommodate giants." He spoke, looking with interest at the armored men standing at the entrance. "All right, show me the way." Jon spoke as some royal guards and Artican men followed him. Jon looked at the giants and motioned with his head for them to stay alert. The maesters didn't even notice how all the soldiers were fully armed, leaving no part of their bodies exposed for a fight. It seemed they were unaware that the Articans were preparing for war, or even if they were, they still felt confident. After all, there were at least 10 times more soldiers from Oldtown standing at the entrance. Jon enjoyed his tour, while looking around paying attention to this place. Although he had been here before, he hadn't explored everything. The sight of the massive library was something that still surprised him. Admirable, isn't it? Archmaester Vorian stepped out from the group of other archmaesters and began to talk with Jon, while he listened to the history of the Citadel from the man over the next few minutes. Prepare the men. Out at sea, the Arctic ships shouted orders to each other as soldiers began donning their armors, running back and forth while the wards tried to organize the ships so they wouldn't get stuck together. Only a few ships would remain out of the conflict, while Jaime looked dazed at what was happening as soon as he emerged from his cabin on another ship, with the Articans on the same ship watching the action around them. "What's happening here?" Jaime asked, curious and quite surprised. We're preparing for a fight. Finally some action, Southerner." A dwarf scowled at Jaime. "Fight? Where are we?" Jaime couldn't be more surprised, wondering who they were going to attack, and he still didn't even know where he was. "It doesn't matter to you, Southern man. Just stay quiet and don't bother. Maybe you can admire our warships." The dwarf continued mocking as the others paid them no attention. Jaime could do nothing but watch men, dwarves, and giants getting ready on dozens of ships as they seemed to be heading for a war. "Wait, let me go," Arya shouted as a dwarf brought her back in front of Serena. "I didn't expect you to run at the first chance." Serena looked at the girl with crossed arms. "I just wanted to see the other ships, I swear," Arya complained, and Serena shook her head at that. "It's not fair. Tormund jumped to another ship," she complained. "Tormund has Jon's authorization to join the battle. You don't," Serena said as Arya pouted. "Anyway, let's go eat something," Serena suggested, and entered with Arya having no choice but to follow her inside the deck. The ships continued organizing as they prepared for battle. They positioned alongside the part of the fleet that would stay, waiting for orders to advance. Meanwhile, some ships were either leaving or even stopping at sea to watch over them. It didn't matter, because with the technology of their ships, they could quickly pass those before they could alert the city. On the coast, 1,000 men were organizing after disembarking from their ships. They were a bit away from the city, but at least none of them had been seen, maintaining the element of surprise as the wargs took care of the area as scouts. "Let's start moving. First, the Arctic soldiers will clear the roads while the giants and heavy loads come right behind," a royal guard organizing the attack said. They began to organize with a large troop divided into groups for each task. Since the giants and even dwarves were the slowest, the human troops began to surround the roads around the group to catch anyone who saw them along the way, so no one could report it to the city. It would be a quick and effective operation, while Oldtown would have no external communication, leaving the city at the mercy of this attack without being able to call for help. "Remember, we must stop anyone we encounter on the road. We'll detain them and put them somewhere so they can break free in a few hours or when we return," the man said. After all, the ships were to stay on the coast, hidden with some guards until the troops returned to set sail again. Thus, they began to march along the road, while their scouts identified any merchant, soldier, or even noble passing by. They were quickly detained, unable to do anything given the size of that force. After leaving them in a safe place without robbing them, they ignored the pleas and cries and headed for the city, and the flow of people increased as they approached. Until the city was visible, there was a main gate, and the city walls were high, but nothing that could stop them. There was a crowd of people at the gate, due to them being suddenly closed without warnings, with nobles and commoners stopped at the entrance complaining and asking to be let in. The guards on the walls explained that the city was closed at that moment by order of Lord Hightower's brother. "How should we do this?" Eldrick asked, standing next to a royal guard, who continued giving orders and looking for the best strategy not to disappoint the Arctic king who was inside the city at that moment. "Well, we need an archer. And you're our champion," he said, calling more archers. "We need to take down all the soldiers on the wall before we blow the gate, but we need to clear this crowd out of the middle of the attack," he said, looking into the distance. "Now you're speaking my language. Let's make a boom," a dwarf accompanying them exclaimed, making a theatrical scene. Yes, prepare everyone and capture anyone who approaches from the city or from our rear. Prepare the explosives. We'll wait for the order from our king before we start acting," he said as everyone nodded, beginning to prepare. Meanwhile, Jon finally climbed several floors in the citadel until he found a completely sealed room. Without windows or even small animals, they prepared well. Jon commented as he wore a cloak over his armor, keeping his helmet in a bag with him. He noticed at least 20 guards with swords around the room, while a man with another 5 guards was seated in a chair in the middle of the place with a table. "Allow me to introduce the High Sparrow of Oldtown, a very influential man and the apostle of the 7 among us mortals," he said, emphasizing his gods while Jon shrugged and looked at the man, who did not even bother to hide his disdain, perhaps because he didn't greet him at the entrance, feeling superior. More people emerged from the door soon after them, while the guards settled in and prepared for anything that might happen there, but Jon asked them to remain calm with a subtle hand signal. Jon calmly sat in front of that septa, while he didn't even bother to greet him, while maintaining an openly disdainful look. The maesters began to fill their seats while the room quickly was filled by 5 archmaesters, 20 maesters, 15 septons, and 40 guards. While Jon was in front of this group, clearly not hiding his pressure, 10 royal guards in Elden metal armor maintained their posture like their king. "So you are here for books." The High Sparrow suddenly spoke. He had white hair, but his voice was that of an experienced orator, accustomed to controlling crowds. "That shouldn't be a surprise," Jon calmly replied. "You should speak with respect to our High Sparrow." Wildling, the voice of one of the septons among the group, exclaimed at Jon for the disrespect. The next moment, all 10 of Jon's guard began to unsheathe their swords as all the soldiers in the room immediately also prepared. "Everyone calm down." The High Sparrow spoke while Jon looked at him calmly. Even Archmaester Vorian asked all the guards to lower their weapons. After all, they still had some things to discuss with this group. "Tell me, why do you want books? Heard some strange things, among them you educating the common folk, for free." Archmaester Vorian now spoke, looking at Jon with curiosity. "You're right, after all, I want to have the smartest people in the world, and I also need to build the largest library in the world in Artica." Jon spoke more than usual, but he did it on purpose, while the group looked at him surprised by this. "You want to build the largest library in the world?" The maesters and archmaesters exclaimed. "You want to educate the common people? What nonsense is this?" The High Sparrow exclaimed, almost horrified by Jon's words. "Should you be surprised? I've never hidden this. After all, just look at my actions since Dorne." Jon mocked them. "This wildling." The High Sparrow murmured and looked at Jon with a grim face. "You talk nonsense. This is absurd." He exclaimed, "It may be to your eyes, but not for Artica. We will have superior education." Jon spoke with a neutral tone. "No one can surpass the Citadel." A maester said from a group, while Jon almost laughed at that. "My sister of 11 years has proven to be as smart or even smarter than your maesters. So I'm very confident," Jon continued, speaking with the same smile. "That's a lot," an archmaester snarled. "Please, let's calm our tempers." Archmaester Vorian spoke, but the group, although silent, looked at Jon like someone they wanted to kill. The head of the Citadel then continued, "We are very interested in Artica, so we want to negotiate with you." He began, and Jon raised an eyebrow at him. "Are you going to sell the books, as Lord Hightower said?" Jon asked. "We will make some books available. If you're interested, we have these books to give you for free." The Archmaester spoke, and one of the maesters took some books from behind his cloak as he approached the table and placed the books with a scroll. "The Order of Maesters and the Faith of the 7. Jon commented, raising an eyebrow at the title of the books. These guys really knew how to make a joke. "If you want to know why we're showing this, read the scroll." The High Sparrow spoke in a tone as if he were talking to a subordinate, while Jon turned to him with eyes gleaming with a dangerous hue, which seemed to affect the man for a split second, but he quickly returned to his normal posture, and Jon went to see what they wanted from him. The construction of a citadel in Artica as a missionary mission with hundreds of maesters to survey the location and learn about our lands. This is an excuse to steal our ideas and take our autonomy. They even want to send a master exclusively to stay with me and assist me in ruling the kingdom due to my age and having no heir yet. Jon began to read the absurd demands they were making there, not even considering that Serena and Ygritte were the mothers of our children. And it didn't end there, for there was another demand, something even more serious. They want to educate us with their true gods, want to indoctrinate us to the faith of the Seven and forget the old gods, treating us as heretics. Jon thought and saw how the eyes of the High Sparrow and Archmaester Vorian gleamed at that moment, waiting for Jon's response. Ha 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 ha! Suddenly, Jon burst out laughing at that. It was the funniest joke he had ever seen in his life, breaking even his kingly posture. What are you laughing at, wildling king? The High Sparrow felt offended by that and demanded immediately. The group also looked at Jon with hostile eyes, while he laughed a bit more before calming down, with his guards watching every movement in the room. Well, this certainly is funny. I came here to ask for books, and you come up with this joke. Jon commented calmly. You think we are joking? The High Sparrow exclaimed, pounding his fist on the table while Jon stared at him with a small smile. I think you haven't even dominated the North, whose religion remains independent, and you simply think you'll control Artica with your southern faith? Jon raised an eyebrow. Do not mock us, Artican king. Archmaester Vorian spoke with a somber tone. That's not entirely true. Jon spoke again. You managed to build a sept in the heart of Winterfell with the fish that lives in the House of Stark, Jon mocked. Listen here, wildling. The High Sparrow began again, with fury in his voice. You better heed our demands. First, you are surrounded and your men could fall at any moment, while the city is closed, and I doubt your men can do anything before we apprehend you. He spoke as Jon stared at him. You really ended the negotiation so quickly. I expected something more prolonged, Jon complained in a sarcastic tone. Listen, King of Artica, you'd better recognize your situation. We are demanding basic things. We want a citadel in your kingdom after getting to know you and assisting you. We want your people to renounce their faith and create septs in this kingdom, educating your people with the faith of the Seven and not with books as you want. Archmaester Vorian spoke. Do you really think you have the power for this? Jon raised an eyebrow. Listen here, wildling bastard. You're just a wildling from frozen lands. We control the Seven Kingdoms. If you still want to negotiate with these lands, you better listen to us. We want our faith in Artica. I want you to renounce your current children and make them bastards, and marry a woman we demand. He spoke, and Jon began to lose patience with this man. They really thought they could control him and even demanded that his children be bastards? Jon changed his opinion from the best joke he'd ever heard to the most absurd thing he'd ever heard in his life. Do you really think we need you? I've already taken everything I needed. The Seven Kingdoms have nothing more to offer us, and I doubt you can replicate our products. Jon mocked, aware that it was not in their interest to keep him alive. After all, they hated magic, and he was currently the most powerful magical force in the world. I ask you to reconsider. After all, we can provide education and salvation for your people. Archmaester Vorian spoke, and Jon shook his head. These people just wanted to rob him. A complete absurdity. He was no longer in the mood to laugh or get angry. He just wanted to end this. You think you're in control? Let's suppose, on a small chance, that you could kill me here. Jon began in a neutral but dangerous tone. My wife carrying my child is hundreds of miles from here. She could simply return to Artica. You wouldn't be able to attack for a long time, and I bet no one in the Seven Kingdoms would do that under your conditions. My son would grow up, and he would burn this place down in a few years. Jon mocked in the same tone. Absurd. Just a wildling with delusions. Kill him. He is an enemy of the Seven, a demon. Both the maesters and the septons began to shout at Jon. What complete nonsense. Put him in a cage, and kill the rest of his men. The High Sparrow spoke confidently, as if he had everything under control. The royal guards were the first to react, drawing their elden metal swords while the enemies did likewise, and footsteps began to come from above, with archers preparing to position crossbows against them. Don't harm the giants too much. I want to study them, a maester immediately exclaimed, and Jon decided to end this. You know you've made a mistake, right? Jon suddenly said, while being surrounded, as the High Sparrow raised an eyebrow, and Jon continued with his most dangerous look. You left me armed, did not give me bread and salt at the entrance, and you threaten me while you are within the reach of my sword, Jon said, and in the next moment, he moved his arm like lightning, drawing his sword from his waist, and the High Sparrow could only move a few inches by reflex as his neck was pierced by Dark Sister, spilling blood on his companions behind him. Jon pierced the High Septon's throat, and for everyone, it was an unexpected shock. Of course, they hadn't offered bread and salt to Jon, given his intentions, and could place evidence against them while they were using weapons, claiming that they had attacked them. But they hadn't expected this to actually happen. Blood spread over the Septons behind him, as time seemed to slow down, with their reactions shown in slow motion, while Jon analyzed the situation with his guards moving slowly behind him, preparing to face all those soldiers running towards them. Jon also saw the archers ready at the top of the room, but he had already foreseen this, and his hidden animals would act at that moment. In the next moment, Jon removed his sword from the man and launched himself at the Archmaester, intending to end his life there. However, he felt one of the maesters carrying a dagger, threw it at him, and quickly his eyes shone emerald between his gray and moved his body swiftly, decapitating that maester. What followed was chaos, as everyone finally began to become aware of what was happening there. Religious people began to move away from the pierced body of the High Septon, who couldn't even speak, dying from the hemorrhage, while the maesters tried to run away, with Archmaester Vorian quickly distancing himself from Jon. Jon's soldiers began to surround him. It was 10 against dozens, but that didn't stop them from having confidence as they awaited the soldiers to clash against them. "Kill them, kill them!" Archmaester Vorian immediately shouted. "Shoot them, kill the savages!" One of the Septons shouted to the archers as they began to aim at the Artican group, but something happened at that moment. Through a hole in that room, birds began to emerge, mainly ravens from the citadel itself. Here, they trained ravens to be messengers and taught them to deliver letters, so there was a large concentration of them in a huge aviary with external birds. He managed to open it, and all the ravens, something Jon had already placed under his control, began to fly out as soon as it was opened. The people who took care of this looked at it in surprise, unable to do anything about the situation other than watch them fly away. The ravens quickly began to follow through the citadel and enter through the hole in that room Jon had found. Even with the maesters cleaning the place of all animals, some were still left, and he managed to map the place. A swarm of ravens simply attacked the archers as they were hit before even firing their arrows. "What is this? My face! Someone get these things off me! My eye!" The ravens turned from simple carrier birds into a killer group, cutting soldiers as best they could, scratching their faces, and even gouging out some eyes. They managed to catch 1 or 2 ravens, but the number of ravens was overwhelming, surrounding them. All 20 archers had been covered, with the maesters and septons watching the scene from the ground, fear in their eyes. In the next moment, the Artican weapons clashed against common swords, the sound of metal filling the room. The common blades quickly lost to the Elda metal, while the royal guards were even superior to the greatest soldiers of Westeros, cutting through their leather armor and killing those men serving those lords. Jon didn't lag behind his men. He noticed how those men who had threatened him and made absurd demands began to run towards the entrance they had come from. Quickly, he started in that direction, cutting the first man while drawing his second sword after putting on his Elda metal helmet to fully protect himself from what would happen next. He commanded the ravens to stop the maesters while the men above them began to shout for help or for the ravens to stop. "We must get out of here! Quick, to the door!" They kept exclaiming in fear until the ravens began to fly towards them, and they had to slow their run, trying to protect their faces. Stop, cursed birds! Kill the sorcerer!" they exclaimed, stunned amidst the flapping wings and the clash of metal happening in the middle of the room. Jon continued advancing, cutting down anyone who appeared in front of him. He moved much faster than he had shown in the Tyrell's training yard. He had become a killing machine, taking down his 4th, 5th, and 6th men before advancing on the maesters and septons. The Artican soldiers received some blows since the number of enemies was large. However, they were fully armored, and with their light armor, they could easily gain an advantage with their skills with swords, axes, and hammers, starting a true massacre. The maesters could barely think amidst the chaos, trying to protect themselves from the ravens attacking them at that moment. But surely, they hadn't believed that their attempt to take over the power of the kingdom north of the wall, seizing its secrets and placing their influence and religion among these people, would end in the massacre they were receiving. If there was anything to regret about their actions, it was too late, as they felt a pain they had never felt in their lives, with their faces being torn or even losing some eyes. The screams of pain dominated the entire room and were so loud that even a group of soldiers who had been stationed outside, waiting for orders from the maesters and septons, could hear it, causing them to tremble slightly, not knowing what was happening inside. "Quick, we must see what's happening," the captain of the squad of 30 other soldiers immediately shouted as they advanced to open the door. Meanwhile, the maesters couldn't even see someone appearing in front of them, ready to end their suffering. Jon was no longer the negotiator who had been discussing with the Martell and Tyrell families as their vassals in recent moons. He had become a monster in battle, a ruthless killer, and that was how Artica acted. After all, it had no enemies because they were all eliminated. Jon swung his sword as he ordered the ravens to finally withdraw. He began to cut down the first man mercilessly, not caring if it was a maester or a man of the faith of the Seven. They had provoked his people, and it was time to show that there was no mercy for his enemies. The first man felt his body pierced by the cold Valyrian steel, falling to the ground. The others barely had time to think as they saw the Artican king there, killing the second, removing the head of another, going for the third, terrifying all the dozens of these men, already injured by the bird's attack. They began to run, but Jon commanded the birds again to prevent them from getting too far, while he continued cutting them down one by one. The door opened as new city soldiers entered, horrified by the scene. On the main table, the High Septon lay dead, with men falling to the Artican soldiers, blood spurting everywhere, birds circling the place while continuing to attack and destroy the archers' faces at the top of the room, and a man with a strange Artican helmet mercilessly massacring the maesters and septons, moving his swords and cutting them down with ease. That sight quickly terrified all the men, and the captain himself took steps back due to all that horror. "Protect the maesters and septons," the commander shouted, pointing at Jon attacking them. The trembling soldiers went to attack him, gaining a bit of courage since it was just one man. The captain did not accompany them. On the contrary, he was so scared that he started to run away, not seeing how they would get out of there alive. He fled while Jon was being surrounded by guards, but his birds soon prevented the soldiers from advancing, attacking their faces mercilessly once again, becoming part of the chaos with their screams. The castle soon began to stir with what was happening in that room, as both the captain fled and some soldiers with blood-covered faces begged for help. "What's happening?" An apprentice maester looked frightened by the screams being heard. "This," a female voice spoke as she dressed in maester's robes. This was Sarella Sand, one of Oberyn Martell's daughters, and she was paying close attention to what was happening, having received a raven from her family after what the Articans had done to her father and sisters. She had learned of the Articans' arrival a few hours ago, drawing the citadels and the city's attention with their sudden visit, even hoping to catch a glimpse of the man she resented. But she couldn't see him properly amid so many maesters, apprentices, and citadel staff at the entrance, and they were quickly escorted inside. Now, with the screams being heard on the upper floors, she began to walk through the corridors, passing by people running in desperation. She was feeling some fear of that chaos, not imagining what was happening there. "Hey, you!" A voice emerged beside her as she looked at this person. "You must get out of here now. I heard from a guard that the Articans are killing the maesters." Archmaester Marwyn said to the apprentice. "What?" She couldn't help but be stunned and frozen. "What are you doing? Get out of here now!" he exclaimed, and she nodded, starting to run away as suggested. Things were far from over, as the group of Articans with giants in the fortress courtyard quickly learned what was happening before seeing people running away from the citadel after hearing from the survivors fleeing that negotiation room. After all, there were wargs not only among them but in the fleet and the men outside the city gate who knew what was happening instantly. "Prepare for combat," one of the men from that group of hundreds exclaimed. And in the next moment, all the dwarves, humans, and giants began to prepare. The 1,000 men guarding the citadel's entrance, waiting for the order to attack them, were surprised when they saw the Articans drawing their weapons and shields. What is happening? Why are they preparing for battle? A commander of that fleet looked at this, wondering what was going on. "Sir, look at the size of those swords." A soldier beside him looked stunned as the 4-meter giants drew their 3-meter swords made of pure Elden metal, while some continued with shields and spears, preparing for offensive and defensive combat against the crowd surrounding them, but without any fear in their actions. Suddenly, someone opened a window on the upper floors and threw themselves out, falling into the courtyard while screaming before dying like an animal. "Prepare for battle." The commander took a second to process what was happening as people began to pass through the citadel door a moment later, screaming for help while trying to flee and avoiding the Artican soldiers preparing for battle. "It seems it has started. Let's get ready." A man at sea, with white eyes, returned to normal before issuing this order. The ships agreed and began to prepare immediately after. "Let's go. Let's attack those damned Southerners," the Articans shouted as the ships started moving, with Arya beside Serena on the flagship, watching all the movement. 90 more ships began to move, heading for the city with 4,500 soldiers. Jaime watched this from a separate ship, stunned, still wondering what they were planning, almost questioning if they were heading to Lannisport. After all, he didn't know the sea and saw merchant ships sailing out sometimes, and he deduced they weren't far from Highgarden. "Curious to know where the ships are going, Blondie," a dwarf asked Jaime with an amused smile. "You won't tell even if I ask." Jaime scoffed, starting to believe that the Artican king was attacking his family's city, even though he hadn't written the letter yet. You're not thinking of telling the Southerners, are you?" Another dwarf approached and mocked his colleague. "You talk as if he wouldn't find out eventually." The first dwarf mocked and looked at Jaime. "It's a city called Oldtown. There's a great library, and our king intends to negotiate differently, as you can see, with many soldiers," the dwarf said, leaving Jaime relieved but at the same time raising an eyebrow, watching the ships depart. The ships that were watching them saw this movement and quickly began to turn to alert the city, but they wouldn't even know how it would be passed on in the next few minutes by the Artican technology. Meanwhile, outside the city, "It looks like it has started. Let's get ready," the royal guard said to Eldrick and the other soldiers. They had captured a lot of people during this time, with people giving up on entering the city while it was closed. But leaving them aside, the commander looked at the equipment they brought and nodded as the giants prepared shortly after. "Sound the trumpets. It's time for them to know we're here." The royal guard gave the order, and the giants picked up a huge trumpet before one approached it and blew into its funnel with his enormous lungs. The sound echoed through the region in the next moment, while the Artican soldiers were prepared to start the attack. The king had informed them about creating his own distraction in the city so they could attack aggressively. Both the people in front of the gate and the guards looked towards the war sound, scared, while in the middle of that field outside the city, Artican soldiers began to appear, more and more, until 1,000 of them emerged, scaring the people so much that they started to run away, leaving behind their goods and belongings in their carts, looking for any place to hide. The soldiers on the wall were alert at that moment as they saw a group of soldiers begin to face that group and start to march among them. From the height they were at, they could hit up to 150 meters away, but the Articans not only had bows made of weirwood, which could reach that distance even from the ground, but the giants were preparing wildfire to destroy the whole place. "Inform Lord Hightower, the city is under attack," the soldier shouted to a messenger who ran off the next moment to inform his lord. He ran, but it was nothing that the patriarch's brother of the Hightower family hadn't already heard from his tower. "What is that sound?" he said, stunned. He was already a bit frustrated with the maesters taking the Articans before them, even though they would go to the Citadel afterward to be imprisoned and fought, but it hurt his pride a little now that he had a bit of the taste of power his brother had over their house. He stepped away from his window and looked toward the window, where he heard the sound of a great trumpet and saw the group of Artican soldiers preparing for the fight. What's happening?" Are they going to attack us? He murmured, surprised by this. Of course, he expected something like this, but not so quickly. My lord, the city is under attack. The door opened with a soldier of the family appearing, the house's master of arms. Yes, I can see that. Prepare all the city's soldiers to defend it. He issued the order quickly, not imagining how useless it would be in the next few hours. In the city, suddenly, a large number of ravens and other birds began to fly out of the windows of the enormous structure, circling the place. It seems it's over, Jon commented as the room fell silent, covering the atmosphere. The floor was covered in blood, while Jon and his soldiers were the only ones standing. Jon looked at the pile of people he had killed. They were men of faith and scholars, but with ambitions that led them to their current fate. Jon killed each one of them, even without them bearing arms or being a threat to him. He killed without mercy. His father wouldn't be proud of something like this if he knew, but for Jon, that didn't matter anymore. He would become a monster if it meant protecting his people's sovereignty, leaving a very clear message. Perhaps not even killing the royal children could be as scandalous as what he did this day, seeing people cut down on the floor. My king, are you all right? A royal guard came up to him, and he nodded. I'm fine. And you, I know there were no casualties, but any injuries? Jon asked. After all, even though they were outnumbered, they had massacred all of them with their advantage in weapons and skills. Jon had eliminated half a dozen soldiers who tried to face him before his soldiers helped, and he returned to mercilessly massacre the maesters and septons. His soldiers quickly made the armed men fall, while some fled. Our armors protected us very well, my king. We have only a few dents, but their poor metal couldn't do anything against us. It was an unequal fight, he said, and Jon nodded. He could see as the guards cleaned their weapons that some people were still dying in silence. Give them mercy, Jon said. He still wanted to give his enemies a quick death as he approached one suffering silently among the maesters. Tell me, Archmaester Vorian, did you have any idea things would end like this? Jon asked as he walked among the bodies and saw the man with a pierced chest, hemorrhaging. The man had pain, fear, and hatred in his eyes when he looked back at Jon. You think you'll get out of here alive? You really were the demon we feared. Damn sorcerer, he spoke with some effort as his mouth filled with blood. We will get out of here alive and massacre anyone who tries to stand in my way. You thought you could control me, just like my people. This created the monster you see before you. I knew this would happen before coming here, though I was very surprised by your confidence in trying to control Artica with a citadel, change our faith, and even want to control the one who would inherit me one day. Jon mocked. You damned bastard. HM. He tried to curse Jon, but Jon simply took his Valyrian steel sword and thrust it into the man's throat, making him moan as he died slowly. We're done here. Let's move on. We must dominate the whole city before sacking this place, Jon said as his men finished off anyone still dying in that blood-soaked room. There was nothing left there. Everyone was dead, while the archers at the top of the room had been killed after numerous cuts, experiencing terrible terror as soon as they raised their crossbows against the Articans and didn't even have time to release their bolts. Jon and his group started to leave the room after that. They still had an entire city to conquer. As they began to pass through the corridors of the place, they quickly started descending, with some guards reacting and clearing the way. They passed by servants and other maesters hidden in various corners, looking at the Artican soldiers in fear while trembling in some of the corners. Jon ignored them and asked his men to head outside, while they were heading for the entrance. Passing by a few more people, they finally emerged in the middle of the courtyard while their men were surrounded by at least 2,000 men, with the other side shouting orders to the soldiers of Oldtown. The presence of Jon, emerging with his cloak covered in blood, was quickly noticed as the enemy soldiers saw him approaching his men with his guards. Seizing the moment, he took off his cloak while finally revealing his hidden armor. "Everyone at my signal," Jon shouted, concentrating a bit of magic in his throat as his voice echoed across the courtyard. "Attention!" The commanders of the Artican groups exclaimed as all the soldiers made a synchronized movement, emitting a sound of footsteps and metal clashing against their shields and armors. Had they killed all the maesters and septons? The man at the front of his soldiers looked at Jon with a furrowed brow as his soldiers came out in large numbers from the citadel, bathed in blood, shivering at the thought of what had happened inside. His gaze went upward as thousands of birds flew over the citadel, making him even more terrified of the Artican king being really the sorcerer of the rumors. He soon resumed his posture and began shouting at his men. "Prepare to attack! Prepare to attack!" The enemy commander exclaimed immediately as the soldiers readied themselves. A bit nervous, after all, they were not as heavily armored as the hundreds of soldiers in front of them, mostly wearing only leather armors. Regardless of whether they could win this battle, they knew many of them would be killed. What they hadn't imagined was how wrong they would be in their misery, because Jon didn't just count on these soldiers. The people of the city soon began to realize that something was wrong. The city is under attack. Common people began to scream in the middle of the streets, running, while others also frightened started to run as well, knowing that something wasn't right there. This began to spread like fire. The savages killed the maesters and septons. "Run! We have to get out of the city. They're going to kill us." The people as one continued running, trying to protect themselves, while the rumors of what had happened in the citadel quickly spread. "Quick! Send a raven to Highgarden," the brother of Lord Hightower exclaimed. He had a tone of urgency as he began to hear the screams of the city with people shouting at that moment. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He exclaimed internally, seeing that the situation was not good for them, wondering what had happened in the citadel. After all, he still had no idea that his trap had backfired and numerous bodies were scattered in that room. While at the port, the screams arrived, and the soldiers a bit away from the Artican ships heard all that shouting. "My lord, what should we do?" A soldier sought guidance from the commander of those troops, as he furrowed his brow at that. "Prepare the troops. We're going to fight the enemies from the port. The order is to eliminate everyone. Hear me," he exclaimed confidently. Before aiding the troops in the citadel, he had to eliminate the Artican boats, and he was confident with 2,000 men with him, scattered across the areas, as they began to gather. It seems they finally came. A warg started to command, and the soldiers began to make a front to the ships. "They're going to launch fire arrows to try to destroy our ships. Dwarfs, prepare the dwindlers," the captain shouted, as the dwarfs prepared some strange equipment on the deck of the ship. The giants began to move forward, being the first barrier against the enemies with their spears and shields. The port began to become the stage for two groups, as one prepared to fight the other, while the men of Oldtown began to surround them with people running from there to avoid getting caught in the heavy conflict. A wall of giants had started to stand between the ships. For the Oldtown soldiers, it was 5,000 soldiers against 500 Articans, with 2,000 of them facing the group in front of the citadel. Another 2,000 were at the port, while the last 1,000 were scattered throughout the city, but most began to concentrate at the main gate. After all, there was a group of 1,000 Articans preparing to attack them from that side. Everything seemed fine for the soldiers, with a victory in sight, while no real movement had yet begun on all sides of the city. But something began to change now, as a man on top of a building looked scared towards the sea. "Lord Commander, a fleet of ships is emerging from the sea," he exclaimed in fright as the horizon line began to be filled with countless ships, starting to appear as small dots and becoming larger. "What? Are they coming to the city?" The commander furrowed his brow as he saw that the situation was not good, since he had no idea how the ships were coming here at this exact moment. "We have to eliminate them before the ships reach the port. Archers," he exclaimed urgently, as hundreds of archers began to prepare arrows with flames at the tip to burn the ships before they fought against that wall of giants. "Ready," he exclaimed as they quickly prepared, pointing their bows upwards with the tips of their arrows burning. "Prepare the dwindlers," the royal guard, who was responsible for commanding that force, exclaimed, while all 10 Artican ships had at least 10 dwindlers each, with the dwarves preparing to launch them, being an equipment exclusive to the race prepared in Artica. "Fire!" the commander of the Oldtown forces exclaimed, and a line of arrows was launched into the sky while burning. They passed the wall of giants with ease, as they were launched towards the ships. The dwarves adjusted the dwindlers and did not even need a command to activate the device, which launched a spinning line of steel into the air. It was at least 5 meters wide, advancing towards the rain of arrows. "What is that?" The enemy commander looked at it, surprised, not knowing exactly what it was. But the next moment, they knew, because that spinning thing in the air collided with the arrows and quickly destroyed them with the collision. At least 98% of the hundreds of arrows were destroyed by 50 of those spinning things in the air. This is a defensive device used to intercept arrows, but also an offensive weapon. After all, its blades continued spinning as they began to fall and could shred anything they touched. "It's coming this way." The commander felt fear in his heart, seeing those 50 things starting to cover them. "Take cover," he shouted, hoping that the soldiers would raise shields while some ran into houses. In the next moment, chaos began as the soldiers barely had time to react with those things falling on top of them, shredding them as they exploded on the ground. The shields were of no use, with them being split by the steel blades and people being cut into several pieces and dismembered. It was a scene of terror for the men of Oldtown, seeing at least hundreds of soldiers being killed in such a horrible way, or even houses and buildings being practically destroyed around them with those things hitting the place. The giants saw the whole scene of death there, but remained stationary while they continued protecting the ships. "Well, it's time to start," Jon murmured, seeing the situation at the port. He had 200 soldiers there and 300 with him, so it was time to face the 2,000 soldiers in front of him. "Prepare for combat," Jon exclaimed while the enemy commander looked towards the sound of destruction coming from the port, not knowing exactly what was happening there, and had to prepare to face the Artican soldiers there. At the same instant, the sounds of explosions of debris from the port were heard by the soldiers on the wall preparing to protect the ships from those men. It was 1,000 against 1,000, with them having the advantage as they were on the defensive. "What's happening there?" murmured one of the soldiers at the front of the wall. "Sir, look at the soldiers. They're making some movement." A soldier pointed towards the outside of the city. The soldiers had not yet started to advance, but saw some war equipment being brought to the front of the group. "What is that? Some kind of catapult?" murmured the knight who was the commander protecting the gate, not having a very good feeling about this. "Prepare to launch and blow up the gate." The commander spoke as the giants prepared arrows with wildfire to destroy the gate, without the men above the wall knowing exactly what was happening there. "But first, let's eliminate those men on top of the wall." He spoke as Eldrick and other archers skilled in handling Artican bows began to march forward, reaching at least 200 meters from the walls, still out of range of the soldiers there. "Hey, why do they think we're going to receive their arrows?" The knight wondered, looking at the strange behavior of these enemies. He looked at his soldiers and also gave an order. "Prepare arrows, fire." He shouted as at least 400 archers above those walls launched their arrows, which fell far short of the Artican archers. "Prepare arrows." It was Eldrick who shouted. After all, the commander would be with the giants tens of meters behind, while the archers prepared their weirwood bows, aiming upwards. "Fire." A much louder explosive sound than that of the archers on the walls echoed through the area as the arrows flew to a point and began to descend. "Wait, how is that possible?" the knight above the wall exclaimed, already calculating the trajectory of those arrows falling on them in the next moment. The arrows quickly began to pierce the soldiers with leather armors as they tried to protect themselves. There were not only archers there, so at least 200 Artican arrows managed to hit mostly those men. Not all could protect themselves among the masonry of the battlements on the wall. The knight saw many of his men dying around him as he managed to protect himself. "Get most off the wall, keep only a number that can protect themselves from the arrows," he exclaimed, frightened by the range of those soldiers. "Aim!" The royal guard gave the order as the giant soldiers prepared devices with cylinders of wildfire. "Fire!" he shouted, and numerous harpoons exploded from there, passing the carts left by the merchants and exploding against the wood of the wall, spreading a blue liquid, being the version 2 wildfire created by Jon. "What is this thing? Why are they launching this?" The knight was increasingly lost with the actions of that group, wondering what it was. After all, no one there knew what wildfire was. In another moment, Eldrick launched a fire arrow, colliding with the blue liquid, causing a huge explosion that not only covered the gate, but the wall itself and the carts of people who had left them there, destroying everything in the next moment in highly explosive and expansive green fire. Boom! The sound of explosions with debris being rapidly destroyed echoed to the entire city with the fire rising. The soldiers of Oldtown, both from the port, in front of the citadel, and others scattered throughout the city, looked towards that side at that moment, with the flames being seen and the people of the city becoming even more panicked everywhere. This! Lord Hightower's brother trembled, stuttering as he saw the explosion happening there. His gaze also went to the sea, while the ships began to emerge on the horizon. "My lord, I fear the city will not withstand," the equally trembling Maester said, stuttering as he saw the city being invaded from all sides. "The news has arrived that the savages have killed all the Maesters and Septons. They are going to eliminate us all," the Maester exclaimed after just hearing about the massacre that had happened in the Citadel. He never imagined hearing something like this in his life. "Let's try to negotiate. It's our only choice. The letter I sent won't arrive in time for them to do something. The city will be taken over much before that." He admitted defeated, not knowing that his raven was already in the claws of one of Jon's eagles at that moment. Jon looked satisfied at the explosion. It wouldn't take long for them to finish off the city's resistance, but he wanted to minimize the number of Articans injured in this fight. "It's time to start," Jon murmured internally, and his eyes began to glow. All the animals, whether in the city or in the sky, began to move strangely. Groups of dogs ran from their dens, rats came out of their sewers, and even cats left the rooftops of houses, starting to follow the crowd of animals, while they ignored the common people running. The birds began to move downward. The commander soon noticed this and widened his eyes. "Prepare for those things," he shouted. As the soldiers began to prepare for the sorcerer's attack, the men in the rear felt something large approaching, and as they turned to see what it was, they exclaimed with a scream of terror at the next scene, with countless animals jumping on them, with dogs piercing their skin with teeth where no armor protected their bodies. "Oh, help! Get these animals off me!" The soldiers soon realized the event happening behind them, and they turned alarmed, while part of the rear was being infested by attacking animals. "May the Seven have mercy on us," the commander exclaimed as soon as he realized what was happening behind them, with the sun quickly darkening in front of him as he turned his gaze to thousands of wings descending at that moment on them. Chaos just began there as all 2,000 soldiers began to scream in despair. "Advance, clear the path," Jon immediately ordered while his soldiers began to march toward the chaotic and disorganized crowd. Not far from there, Sarella Sand stood at a safe distance. But trembling with what she was seeing, her anger at Jon Artica turned into fear, wondering what would happen in Dorne if he had done the same thing there. He was no longer the man who was negotiating with the Martells. Even with the snakes dominating Sunspear, Jon was intent on killing anyone in that city who tried to stop him. She saw the first giants with giant swords cutting through the first line of soldiers, trying to remove the crows from them, and a line of blood spurted as they were cut in half. "What is this? How can anyone fight against these monsters?" she thought, trembling and frightened, watching each movement of the giants, reaping at least half a dozen lives. The events with animals were not something exclusive happening in the Citadel, because at the port the soldiers, still recovering from the chaos, were surprised with animals attacking them mercilessly from behind, while the giants began to move with their shields and spears, starting to pierce the soldiers in the front lines in the streets as they passed by the dismembered bodies from the dwarfs' attack. At the city's main gate, the Articans continued launching arrows at the wall, with that little opening allowing a group of soldiers to begin moving into the city. The archers prevented them from launching a force against the line of Artican soldiers on the still intact walls. The wildfire had diminished, and the gate's wall was in ruins along with it. But that didn't stop the soldiers from beginning to cross over the debris as they started to invade. The soldiers there, largely destroyed, with flames spreading through those streets, looked in fear as animals also began to attack them from behind at that moment. It didn't take long for the first Articans to pass through the destroyed wall and advance against that force. The already frightened people retreated further from the conflicts occurring at 3 points in the city, as smoke rose in various parts, and the noble Hightower tried to control the unfavorable situation for them, while the city was beginning to be destroyed. "They are already starting," a dwarf exclaimed from one of the ships looking at the city at various points, having clouds of smoke. "Yes, what did you expect? It's a pity I'm not among those soldiers." Another dwarf spoke beside him. "Stop complaining. You'll soon join our king and our men." The Artican soldier spoke. As the ships approached the port at high speed, many that were docked began to leave there, fleeing from the city that seemed lost. After all, 6,000 Artican soldiers were about to fill the place. No one in Westeros knew the desperation the inhabitants of that city were experiencing at that moment. But as soon as all the kingdoms heard news about this, they would have another opinion about this group that emerged beyond the wall. "Let's go. Wipe out all enemy forces and take the city," Jon exclaimed at the forefront, his voice echoing throughout the place. The giants continued to clear a path, leaving a trail of dead behind them, while the rest of the group did not lag as the Oldtown soldiers began to retreat, trying to escape the claws of the birds, killing some and even hitting their own comrades in the attempt to flee from the situation. They were quickly struck down by Artican soldiers, relieving them of their misery. Jon was at the front, advancing where the giants could not reach, quickly reaping lives. The numerical advantage seemed insignificant compared to what they were now facing, while at the main gate, the Artican soldiers swiftly began to dominate the area. Jon could see all this as he expanded his vision over the city. "Take control of all the western area and head to the west gate," Jon shouted as some wargs waited for his command. The warg quickly relayed the orders to the group. They followed, fiercely battling against the men who were trying to keep the animals at bay. "What is this? How are these animals attacking us?" the men exclaimed as they tried to free themselves from dogs, cats, and other small animals biting them. "They are coming!" the soldiers shouted as the Artican soldiers continued to advance through the streets near the dominated gate. Some soldiers tried to resist, but the Articans quickly proved their superiority, passing by frightened citizens and creating a path of fallen people through the area. Rick Hightower, OC, the brother of Lord Hightower and Highgarden, was having a difficult time with smoke rising from 3 points in the city, while he was near one due to the high tower being close to the harbor. "What should we do, father?" his son murmured, scared, as the screams of both people and even animals could be heard outside the walls. "We should negotiate with them. Do not open the gate and wait for them to appear. From what I've heard, the city soldiers are falling quickly." He spoke with frustration and a tone of defeat due to everything that was happening. "My lord, ships are arriving at the harbor," one of the men said as he kept watch over the harbor and came to report. "The city will be taken. There's nothing more to be done about it." He admitted, still trying to understand how they were losing so quickly to this group they had planned to dominate. The ships quickly arrived at the harbor, while the other 200 soldiers maintained the dominated area, preventing enemy forces from approaching the harbor. The fire arrows that breached their defense and were thrown at those ships were quickly extinguished, and now, with the reinforcement of another 4,500 soldiers, there was no hope for the soldiers to keep the city against the Articans. "Let's go." Tormund emerged from one of the ships as everyone followed him, starting to drive all the soldiers from the harbor. The citizens could only try to hide in the more distant parts of the city. There was a river running through the middle of the city that separated the two sides with a bridge. However, there was conflict on both sides, while her city was on the right side of the city center, the north gate on the other side of the river. At the harbor, both sides were dominated, with part of the ship heading west to control the region. Most of the population moved to the north of the right side, where the Great Sept was, hoping to find protection. Some Septons who did not attend the meeting began to gather people, praying that the group of savages would leave the city and that the Seven would protect them. Until that moment, with smoke at the north and south gates of the city, people were already aware of what was happening there and knew that Jon Artican had massacred all the Grandmaesters and Septons along with the High Septon. The entire city was in panic over this, and seeing animals attacking their soldiers didn't help much as people continued trying to hide. Jon and his group continued fighting against the soldiers, gaining ground as the soldiers retreated, lost due to not having any command in the midst of chaos and not knowing what was happening in the city at that moment. The soldiers at the harbor began to enter the city, starting to eliminate all the soldiers who tried to stop them. And as they approached the citadel, the chaos continued with the soldiers themselves feeling surrounded on all sides. It was no longer a fight, with the giants handling the attacks while the Artican archers killed anyone on top of the buildings, and it didn't take long to eliminate all the resisting forces on that side. Jon was drenched in blood, having eliminated 60% of the enemy forces without stopping until the rest surrendered, seeing that they could no longer fight with them. "It seems it's over," Jon commented while looking at all the blood-strewn streets, whether it be from men or animals. "My king, what should we do with the surrendered men?" A royal guard approached. "Keep them all in an open place where they can be held. Any attempt at disobedience, eliminate it," Jon said. "What should we do about the Hightower?" He spoke of the great tower where the Hightower family resided. "I saw that some ships are surrounding them. Keep it that way. I want a siege ready to destroy that place. For now, let's keep it that way, and I want all Artican soldiers to spread out on all the streets blocking the way to the citadel. Also send 2,000 forces to assist the 1,000 soldiers dominating the eastern area of the city," Jon ordered, and the soldier quickly left to execute all the king's orders. Jon turned to a man organizing everything in the army with wargs. "Tell me, what are our losses?" Jon asked. "My king, we lost 190 soldiers, 138 men, 51 dwarves, and 1 giant." He spoke with a sad tone. "We couldn't have won this without losing our allies, but it's okay. I want them treated as heroes when we return to Artica. Keep their bodies on ice so they do not decompose until we return to the kingdom," Jon requested, and the men nodded. They had eliminated more than 2,500 soldiers, so it was a crushing victory when they had lost only 190 soldiers, but Jon still felt a bit sad about his men dying there. After sighing a bit, he returned to his intense gaze and quickly resumed giving orders. "I want a large group with me in the citadel. While the other men keep tending to the city, there's no reason for us to completely dominate the city. Leave the eastern side without going to dominate them, and for now, let's head to the citadel again," Jon instructed. They headed to the citadel after that. Jon had a great interest in what it could provide, and finally the moment to plunder the place had arrived. They quickly returned while there were many maesters at the location, and as soon as they saw the Artican group returning among the bodies of city soldiers, they began to run from there in desperation. "What should we do, my king?" the soldier asked, looking at the location. "I want you to look in every corner of this place and investigate it. I'm looking with the rats, but I can't access all areas," Jon said, and the men nodded, entering the place with him. They quickly began to scour all areas of the citadel, while Jon headed to the great library, which occupied the entire hollow part of the structure. "I wonder how many books there must be here. Maybe 1,000,000 of them. Maybe more," Jon commented softly as he surveyed all the shelves, keeping a greedy look and a smile. "Is there no one else to face here?" Suddenly, a sound emerged behind Jon, and he turned, wondering what the hell Tormund was doing there. Tormund approached with a dissatisfied face, and Jon turned back to him. "The fight is already over, Tormund. We are finishing dominating this area, and the only fights happening are in the west. So, it will be over soon. Just stay quiet," Jon said calmly. "But this was too easy. I thought the Southerners would defend their cities more stoutly," he murmured, and Jon ignored him as other groups of soldiers approached. "My king, we've checked every place in the building. There are no more hidden guards, and those we found along with the maesters are being taken to join the others," a guard reported to the group. "That's good. I want at least 1,000 men here inside to start collecting all the books from this place," Jon ordered. "Yes, let's do that." The men quickly organized before they started entering the citadel and began to take books from the first shelves and carry them outside. Jon looked satisfied as he watched his men start the looting of the largest library in Westeros, or perhaps the world, which soon would be surpassed by the library in Artica. They continued this until a man emerged from one of the walls, scared. "What are you doing? What madness is this?" A lord dressed in maester's robes with chains and links on his chest exclaimed, terrified after seeing the men looting the entire place. "It seems we missed one," a royal guard commented, displeased. Jon looked at the man, who practically begged as he approached him. "As you can see, master, we are looting the place." Jon stated the obvious to the man as he looked on in terror. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being so cruel?" he demanded, not wanting the citadel to be looted. As he'd spent his life here, he loved this place. "You tried to kill my men until a moment ago, try to control my people. So, don't come at me with that. I'm just doing what you asked for. Didn't you want me to be a monster? Well, here I am. Besides, our country needs books, and we've found such a large source here," Jon said unashamedly. The man seemed quite shaken by this, but royal guards took him away, while the Articans began to climb ladders and remove all the books from the highest shelves. A particular book seemed to catch Jon's attention from one of the shelves among those hundreds of thousands of books. "Why does that book bother me so much?" Jon murmured, feeling a strange premonition about it. He didn't ask anyone to fetch the book. Instead, a red eagle entered through the window he had requested, and it went to the spot, dozens of meters off the ground. It flapped its wings in front of the book while grabbing it with its talons, trying to do so without damaging it. The red eagle brought it to Jon a moment later, as he looked at the cover of the book with his premonition growing even stronger. "The Diary of High Septon Maynard." Jon read aloud and raised an eyebrow. Why is this book drawing so much of my attention? But he stopped murmuring and stored the book away, as he needed to do other things now. "Let's look at this later," he commented, and started to move to one side while calling some guards with him. They headed to the ground floor again, but through another side of the citadel, as Jon and his men emerged in a secret place, descending to a staircase that led to the basement. "What is this, my king?" a royal guard commented after passing through a large open door, entering a rather large area with chairs and little sunlight coming from above. "This is the vault of the place. It seems that here, those archmasters held secret meetings," Jon commented. "What do they have in the vault?" A guard murmured. "I still don't know, but it seems to be quite valuable things." He commented Jon had seen some of the memories of some small animals from there, but he couldn't enter or see what was inside. They passed the location where the maesters held secret meetings, and moving forward, there was a large door, like a vault, all reinforced. Jon examined that door as they reached it. "Can we get a giant in here?" Jon asked. After all, he alone couldn't break down that door. "Can't we destroy it, my king?" a royal guard asked. "No, there's a strong smell of wildfire in the air. There's a concentration of it on the other side, although it's not as pure as the kind we manufacture," Jon, as an experienced alchemist, commented. "However, that doesn't stop us from destroying one of the walls to allow our giants to pass a few meters above," Jon said. "Let's fetch the wildfire from the ships, my king." Jon heard his man and nodded. "All right, bring sand and also carts so we can take the things here and discreetly carry them to my ship," Jon requested. The man nodded and left, while they waited for a while, with the citadel becoming increasingly devoid of books, and taking them to the ship. As the preparations were finally made, and they placed the wildfire on one of the walls before blowing it up without affecting the large structure of the citadel. After blowing up the wall, 4 giants managed to enter the place. They tied the door with steel rope and strapped it onto the shoulders of the giants. As they quickly forced it to move by pulling the ropes at that spot, the door began to dent due to the force of the 4-meter-tall men, and with a loud bang, the door burst open, falling forward. "That's good. Now let's see what they keep in there," Jon commented, moving forward with some men. It didn't take long for them to emerge into an area full of books, gold, treasures, artifacts, chemicals, and even other things he hadn't expected to find there. "There's gold, but there are many more valuable things here," Jon said, eyes wide as he surveyed the meticulously organized space. "Be careful with the torches. There's wildfire here," Jon warned again as they tried not to touch anything with the torches that could explode. "Take all the gold and books. I want you to keep a separate place for me to analyze later." Put it on a ship that goes directly to mine, at the harbor, Jon requested, and the men nodded, starting to remove everything they could through the opening they had created in the wall. I want you to throw sand on the explosive liquid. We can't risk keeping this wildfire stored down here, he also said while his men began to bring it. He moved further ahead and began to see even more valuable things. There were hidden Valyrian steel weapons. This is interesting. Maybe they use this to produce the links that study magic, Jon commented, pleased, wondering if Westeros knew that the maesters kept this with them. After all, there were quite decent swords among them, although most were daggers and small blades. Now that he could have a good stock of this metal, he would create new swords for Artica. His gaze continued forward, and he found something he didn't expect to have on this trip. There were dragon eggs, at least 12 of them, all neatly organized in a corner. Jon approached them and touched them. Even though they were still beautiful and colorful, they seemed at the same time like pure rocks, deadened by time. But as soon as he touched them, he felt the warmth and cracked a smile. They're alive, just waiting to be awakened, Jon murmured, excited. After all, what were the chances that he could have more dragons? Aragon would not be alone anymore. There was also the dragon in Skagos, but he didn't know how to deal with it. My lord, we found an entrance downstairs with a staircase. A guard pulled Jon from his thoughts as he approached. Jon looked at him curiously, then turned back to the others. I want you to also securely store and transport the dragon eggs. Keep them out of sight and place them along with all the belongings we removed from this room, Jon ordered. The men quickly began to follow the order, while he followed his royal guard who had found a passage with a staircase leading down. They proceeded, being careful not to ignite anything with the torch, and followed to an entrance with a door, fortunately open and unlocked. As they opened it, they found another kind of laboratory, but what shocked him to the core. These bastards! How dare they? How did they manage this? Jon murmured with as much rage as a roar from Aragon at that moment. There were several stretchers in front of him, filled with dead bodies, but with their bodies opened up, appearing to be studying them. My king, they are people from... The royal guard commented. They're from north of the wall. Jon completed his sentence with a continuous tone of anger. Somehow brought here, and they're still wargs. Jon immediately felt it, furiously upset with those maesters. It seemed they were collecting wargs from north of the wall, which wasn't so hard, seeing they could hire any smuggler to raid tribes in groups and bring them here for study. Either way, they're dead. Let's just make sure nothing more comes of this, Jon said, and his royal guard nodded. What should we do? The guard asked. My inclination is to blow this place up, but we can't be so radical. Not this time, Jon admitted. Let's just finish looting the place and go, he said in the end, since he still had to deal with Lord Hightower's brother Jon left the Citadel as soon as everything was ready for transport. He emerged outside while his men had numerous wagons brought from the ships, placing all the looted items in them, before transporting them to the port. I noticed that you've dominated the west side. Any problems? Jon asked one of those responsible for organizing the Artican men. Everything is under control, my king. We just had some trouble with a force concentrating in the east, trying to get past our men, but it was easily repelled. The city is practically taken, my king. Jon heard this and nodded to his man. That's good. There's nothing more we can do here. It's time to have a conversation with the current person in charge of the city. Jon spoke calmly. Yes, my king. He spoke as they organized a group of soldiers to accompany the king to the south of the city. They quickly began descending the city, Jon with 50 guards passing through empty streets filled with dead people. As he approached the great tower, surrounded by the river that passed through the middle of the city and met the sea. The place was surrounded by Articans from every side, while they positioned themselves in front of the water ready to attack. There were men in the windows with bows ready, prepared to guard the place. How are things there? Jon approached the man responsible for the siege, another royal guard. My king, as you can see, we've surrounded the place and are waiting for a response from Lord Hightower, but he wants to speak first with you. He spoke, and Jon nodded. Send a message saying I am here. Jon said calmly. The royal guard nodded and wrote on a letter that Jon was here and sent it on an arrow before throwing it to a safe place over the walls around the tower. Now let's wait, Jon said. and they waited 20 minutes. These damn, they think we are what to wait so long. Greg growled near Jon. He was a robust Artican man with a short fuse. I have to agree with Greg. These guys are under a siege and think they can do something like this? Jon commented with a not frustrated look as his bird passed by the place. But Lord Hightower's brother with his son seemed to argue in a room without windows or spaces to let any rodent through after seeing Jon control nearly all the animals in the area where the war took place. It was at that moment that he saw a new movement inside the structure as men began to come out of it, and a well-dressed man approached one of the gates. Then they opened it, coming out with some guards in house armor, while they took a small boat and moved towards where Jon was on the eastern side of the city. They finally approached, and Jon asked some men to bring them to him. While he waited seated, picking up an Artican wine and drinking it, this drink was not traded due to complications they could have with Dorne, since Jon wanted to put those products there. Not that it mattered now. After all, the attack on this city made Artica and the Seven Kingdoms have a completely destroyed relationship. Not that he cared about that now. The men were soon brought to him, while they looked quite nervous around the Articans looking at them. It was 4 guards and the man with more social clothing, looking at Jon carefully. Jon Artica, the king of Artica, began the negotiator with a voice trying to maintain a posture. I am emissary Lyle, sent by House Hightower to discuss the terms of your occupation. Jon nodded slowly, allowing the man to continue. We recognize your control over Oldtown and wish to avoid further bloodshed. We are willing to discuss how we can come to an agreement. What does your lord have to offer me before we start breaking that gate? Jon spoke calmly. My lord would like to negotiate inside his house, if you would accompany me with some guards. He spoke, and Jon wanted to laugh at that. You should already know my conditions. There will be no negotiation inside the place. I want him to lower the bridge and come out surrendered. Jon spoke. That's the only way for me to be merciful to you. But Artican King, that's not fair. The man spoke. Fair? You think I didn't know your lord's plans, what he planned with us, when he asked me to accompany him to his tower? Jon mocked as the man swallowed hard. But he tried to argue once more. Stop. You don't need to continue. Jon raised his palm and continued. These are my conditions. I want 20 minutes until your lord raises the bridge and surrenders. Otherwise, we will start the attack. Jon said, Take them away. There's no more negotiation. Jon ordered, and the men were quickly taken away by his men. What should we do, my king? A royal guard asked. Let's prepare to destroy things. They're not going to surrender, and I want you to keep an eye on any of those archers in the tower. Any attack from them in these 20 minutes, you can kill. Jon gave his order. The men quickly began to organize while Jon prepared for any sign of surrender from the other side. At one moment, the windows were filled with more archers, and they began to arm arrows. But before they could shoot them, Artican arrows began to intercept them, eliminating all of them. 15 minutes, and he gave his response. Very well, blow up both drawbridges. Jon ordered as each side of the river prepared to launch wildfire. The giants quickly began to launch their giant arrows with the green liquid, and before the people inside the tower could react, both gates were blown up in the next moment. Boom! Boom! The entire city heard the echo of the explosion as the fire rose in the south of the city. The tower with the lighthouse trembled at that moment, and Jon nodded with that, waiting a bit before starting to advance. His ships were positioned to send troops. While this quickly happened, and Jon didn't even need to interfere as he approached the place a moment later. Jon saw his men holding the entire Hightower family there, while what seemed to be the eldest son trembled with fear. Lord Hightower's brother in Highgarden had an angry look at Jon. Do you know what you've done? You've started a war with the entire south of the wall. He exclaimed. I'm aware of that. Lord Hightower, you should know that by making me your enemy, I would attack. Or did you really think I would stay silent while you kept me like a trapped rat? Look at the result. We managed to end all the forces of the city, losing very few enemies. Jon spoke calmly. You're some kind of witch. You're a demon. I saw what you did with the animals. He exclaimed, losing his composure. Well, it was you who wanted to mess with this demon. And great, you gave me a good reason to start looting all the Hightower's vaults. Jon said, and looked to his men. Loot the place, steal everything valuable. This will be my response to this house." Jon said, "You can't do this." He tried to exclaim, but Jon looked to a man who was behind the noble and nodded, making this man hit the head and make the man faint in front of his son. "What can we do now?" Jon murmured and looked at the tower. "Very tall, isn't it? Must be a nice fall." Tormund appeared at Jon's side at that moment, and he wondered how the redhead came to be there. "I think you're right. I feel like knocking down this tower. Why not blow it up?" Jon suddenly spoke, and this made the people in the castle widen their eyes to that. After all, they had seen the Articans blow up the gates without any difficulty. "You can't do this, please, King of Artica." The young man, who should be Jon's age there, exclaimed, but unlike his father, it was not a demand. "Well, I couldn't do it even though I wanted to. After all, we have to maintain our stock of wildfire. After all, we don't know what we will encounter at sea with Westeros wanting to hunt us." Jon murmured quietly before turning back to that young man. "You're lucky, so pray we never come back here. Otherwise I will knock down this tower and watch from some privileged place." Jon said in the end, "What will we do now with the men taking the gold, my king?" The royal guard asked, and Jon had a shrug. "Seems like there's nothing left to do in the city. Just finish looting the place. Meanwhile, I'll return to my ship," Jon said, and before leaving there, he looked at the man on the ground passed out. "I also want him taken as our prisoner, but he's more ill-mannered than Ser Jaime, so keep him in a cell for the rest of the trip." Jon said and left, ignoring his son pleading for it. He returned to the ship after coming back, and the first thing he did was go to a cabin. Now we have to give an answer to the king of Westeros before any raven arrives about what happened. Or maybe I should send both letters at the same time. Jon thought calmly, wanting to see the face of each of the council members after this event. He still held the letter he had taken from Lord Hightower's brother's plea for help. He would send both letters to see their reactions. Then he began to write his response letter, while his men continued bringing wagons full of books to the ships, filling them with everything they could. It didn't take long for the ships that didn't have animals, filling them with hundreds of thousands of books. Jon was plundering at least 60% of the Citadel, such a large number that it would be a good start for Artica to educate its population. He didn't want to plunder the metals of the city because the common people had nothing to do with his quarrel with the maesters, nobles, and men of the faith, so he only took what he could from those groups. It didn't take long for the ships to finally be ready to depart, while a group of 1,000 Articans headed north, where their ships were moored. Jon left his room and caught one of the flying ravens, attaching the messages to its little legs, and made it take off for King's Landing. No one yet knew what happened in this city for a few days. After all, even though some castles outside the city could see the chaos and smoke rising from it a few kilometers away, it would take days to reach Highgarden if Jon didn't prevent them from being sent. "My king, we've finished loading all the ships and the men are returning to the port right now." A royal guard spoke, and Jon nodded. "Great. Let's start to depart as soon as everyone is safe." Jon said. The Articans began boarding the ships, organizing themselves over the next 30 minutes while the last one finally entered. Jon gave the order for them to begin departing, leaving a city totally in chaos and destruction. He may have been harsh, but it was the response he had to give to Westeros, that if they really wanted to mess with his people, these would be the consequences. The 100 ships from the port began to gather at sea with the other 20 that were on the north coast, and they advanced towards the other 30 ships at sea. Arya finally spotted the ships approaching a while later, while she exclaimed to Serena, heading to the side of the ship and smiling that her husband was finally back and hoping he was well. Meanwhile, Jaime had just finished writing the letter that the Artican king had requested from him, while he had placed it on a raven that the Artican men had offered him. He watched the fleet approaching and beginning to position around them. Jon's ship moved alongside the main one where his queen and Arya were, as he began moving to that ship with his royal guards and the items acquired. Nothing of great importance was acquired from the Hightowers, but there was a lot of gold that they had managed to obtain. "How was it, Jon? Did you have to fight many warriors in the city?" Arya asked eagerly as soon as she saw him arriving. "I had to fight a few," Jon commented, while touching Arya's head and kissing Serina's forehead as he approached. It was quite disappointing. Tormund approached with a tone of disappointment. "Don't be a bore, Tormund." A royal guard spoke. "Anyway, let's go inside. I want to rest a bit. Controlling so many animals gave me a headache that I haven't felt since my 8th name day." Jon mentioned, recalling that he had reached his limit just at that farm in Ice Hill. He began to tell Serina and Arya what happened, and both were quite angry as soon as they heard what Jon had heard from those maesters and septons. But Jon continued and spoke of the spoils he had managed to get. "Do you have dragon eggs?" Arya commented in surprise. "Yes, they're in some boxes that I asked to be taken to my room." Jon said, "Can we see them?" She asked immediately. "Later. I'll organize them. I'm happy and surprised that we managed to get 12 of them while the maesters have been storing them inside the Citadel the entire time." Jon said. They chatted a bit while having a meal, and Jon went to the outside of the ships. "Captain, take the ships to the next stop." Jon requested, and the man nodded. "To Lannisport, right?" he said, and Jon nodded again, before he began shouting orders to all the other ships, with the night finally arriving. Jon decided to go to the room with his wife waiting for him. He saw the place filled with chests. He began to open them while Serina watched him in silence. He started placing the eggs on some pillars around the bed. "What is this?" she asked curiously. "I want them to stay close to us. Actually, I want them to get used to our son." He spoke with a smile. "So Aragon will have new companions?" she said with a playful tone. "I hope so, 12 of them. Just imagine, dragons flying over Artica, making nests in the great weirwood." Jon imagined this scene. "That would certainly take Artica to a new level," she admitted. "Yes, let's just wrap up our things in Lannisport and leave. We will have time until the baby is born." Jon said. Lannisport was the last stop. After all, he had no more places to stop in Westeros. The only place he might try would be the Vale, but that was now out of possibilities. Jon ended up going to sleep with Serina while they were surrounded by dragon eggs ready to be hatched when they arrived in Artica. The next morning, the Queen of Artica woke up while seeing her husband next to the bed, looking at a strange book. "Jon, what is this?" she asked curiously. "It's a book I took from the Citadel." He responded vaguely. "You didn't answer my question. You took at least 600,000 books from that place. But out of those 600,000, just one you keep with you, and I saw you hid it among your clothes. Why?" She pressed, and Jon sighed. "It's hard to explain, but something tells me that when I open it, everything will change." Jon murmured, feeling a connection between him and this book. Something he couldn't explain, but was certain that his life would be turned upside down. "Do you want me to see it with you?" she asked with a loving tone. "No, I need to do this alone, but I'll look at it later, when we are returning to the north," Jon said, wanting to put off worrying about it for later. Jon got ready and had breakfast with his sister, before calling her to see the dragons later, as the ships were heading north. Meanwhile, ravens began to fly to various parts of Westeros, starting from there, with important information, as one raven flew to Casterly Rock, another to the Kinglands, and the raven that would arrive first in Highgarden. The mood was already tense in the place, as the news of what happened near Oakgarden was heard by everyone there, with Jaime Lannister being captured and taken by the Artican group. "What should we do, my prince?" Ser Loras asked while the whole family was gathered with the prince. Jon Artica had kidnapped the son of Tywin Lannister, who is also a royal guard and is at sea with him. "Can we do anything?" "Just send a letter to King's Landing. Do they still want us to keep the Articans under custody?" Those fools from King's Landing didn't seem to have any idea what was in our waters if we tried anything against the group. Olenna spoke and scoffed. "Yes, I'll notify my brother. I wonder what they will say when they hear the news about the fall of 2 royal guards." Renly commented, a bit lost. "Well, anyway," Olenna was about to say more when the door burst open with an explosion and a maester fell through. "My lady, I apologize for this." He just ran and jumped at the door. A guard spoke, immediately explaining the maester's conduct. Everyone looked curiously at the scene, while the maester tried to get up with a frightened expression. "My lady, it's urgent. There's news from Oldtown. The city has been sacked," he exclaimed, his tone indicating the gravity of the situation. The days were passing, and a raven arrived at Casterly Rock, while Tywin Lannister had already learned what happened to his eldest son in the Reach a few days ago. The Maester quickly grabbed that strange raven, coming directly from the Artican ships, and furrowed his brow as he read it. He immediately started moving swiftly through the corridors towards his Lord Solar. "What do you want, Maester?" Lord Lannister is in an important meeting at the moment. One of the door guards quickly stopped him. "It's urgent news, a letter written directly from your son," the Maester announced as the men looked at each other, finally nodding, and knocked on the door. Tywin Lannister was not having an easy time, although he did not know what had happened in Oldtown, due to Jon eliminating all communications for a less complicated negotiation. He still received the news that his son had followed Jon Artica and ended up as a hostage while they were at sea at that moment. He read the news with an indifferent face, but his eyes were trembling. Anger, frustration, and even fear ran among the Lord of Casterly Rock. Not that he showed it, always keeping a serious face, but he had to act in some way. His first call was for his brother to come here from Lannisport, discussing anything they could do. This was not wise at all, sending a royal guard to arrest a man who has a fleet at sea. Kevin Lannister commented with a grim look. Yes, that fool sent Jaime on a suicide mission. What did he expect to achieve with that? Tywin said in the same grim tone, as his mind worked quickly to get his son out of this situation. "They will certainly have to negotiate," Kevin murmured. Tywin said nothing, but was waiting for the letter to arrive. After all, there was no reason for these Articans to keep Jaime in custody forever. Kevin sighed and looked at his older brother cautiously. "I heard what they did to the royal guard, Cerberus. Do you think?" He commented quietly. "My son will not be touched." Tywin immediately dismissed that possibility with a small outburst, while Kevin just nodded, not wanting to enrage his brother at such a sensitive point. It was no secret to anyone how Tywin saw Jaime as a successor to Casterly Rock, even though he was a royal guard with a vow. "He'll be fine. There's no reason to hurt him beyond the king's foolishness," Kevin commented. "Yes," he commented, and the next moment, there were some knocks at the door, and Tywin and Kevin looked in that direction. "Enter," Tywin said, hoping it was something worthwhile otherwise. "My lord." The guard opened the door. "The Maester is saying that he received a letter from your son." He spoke, and Tywin raised an eyebrow. "Let him in," he immediately requested as the man entered the room. "My lord," the Maester murmured calmly. "Just leave the letter and get out," Tywin ordered in a dry tone, and the man did exactly that as he closed the door, leaving just him and his brother alone again. Tywin wasted no time as he picked up the letter and began to read. Kevin watched his brother reading for a while until he finally finished reading, before handing the letter to his brother, showing no expression. Kevin took it and began to read. He finished and returned to his brother after reading a second sheet attached to the letter written by Jaime. "So he wants iron and steel," he murmured. "It seems so. Gold does not seem to be so attractive to these Articans, since they seem to spend without worrying in Dorne and Reach." Tywin commented. "What shall we do?" Kevin asked. "We will do exactly that. I want you to buy everything and take from our stock what they ask for. We will wait for them to arrive in Lannisport soon." Tywin spoke. He would spare no expense in saving his heir. "At least he is well. Do you plan to do something with them?" Kevin asked, wanting to know what his plans are. Knowing him, he would not let this humiliation of the Lannister name go cheaply. "They've paid for it. I have a plan to deal with them. It's a shame we can't have their products, but no one in Westeros will have them either after this, and I'll make sure of it if the Tyrells and the Martells still want to negotiate." He spoke with a dangerous tone. Kevin just nodded, leaving it to his brother. "I want you to go back to Lannisport and wait for any sign from the fleet at sea," he began. "Tyrion is still organizing the city's sewers, right? Make that thing do something more useful as soon as it's done," he spoke. "Yes, brother," Kevin spoke, although he didn't sympathize with how his brother treated his own son, since he, Jenna, and the missing Jerian liked Tyrion and treated him like family. Thus, Kevin returned with a group of guards towards Lannisport. Meanwhile, to the east, in King's Landing, the Raven with even darker news arrived at the Red Keep, with a young maester's assistant picking up the Raven and noticing that one of the letters was open. He read it out of curiosity and was startled when he saw a plea for help from Oldtown with a letter sealed with the symbol of Artica on it. He quickly began to traverse the corridors, heading to a room with royal guards at the entrance. This was the council room, having a discussion at that moment that the king himself had to attend. "My brother is with those savages," Queen Cersei exclaimed. "Do you expect the whole kingdom to just go out and rescue your brother, woman?" Robert exclaimed. Most of the counselors were just observing the situation without getting too involved. "It's the Tyrell's fault. They should have helped." Cersei continued to blame others to demand help. "Your brother left the castle in a hurry. That didn't even have time to do anything." Robert, despite not liking that family who fought alongside the dragons many years ago, was still rational about it. "But Ser Boros, he became an ally thanks to that savage," she exclaimed. "Your Majesty, I believe she's right. They hurt a royal guard to the point where he can't even see with one eye." Baelish commented carefully this time. "I know. This is an affront against the Iron Throne, and the Articans will have orders to be arrested as soon as they touch lands of the Seven Kingdoms. But we can't call the kingdoms to war because 2 royal guards were victims of them." Jon Arryn spoke this time. "My brother is with these savages. He is the queen's brother. That alone is reason enough." She exclaimed, frustrated. "Your father has to do something." "Annoying woman," Robert said angrily. "I don't know how Jaime Lannister is, but this group doesn't seem to attack irrationally. Ser Boros fell from grace due to his actions and unfortunate words. Jaime attacked alone in an attempt to capture Jon Artica. I believe he will negotiate. After all, we know he has plans to visit the West." Stannis commented calmly. "Do you know where they are now, eunuch?" Robert turned to Varys, who had been silent after passing the latest information. "I haven't received any chirps from my little birds yet. The only thing I know is that they plan to go to Oldtown before heading up to the west," he commented. "Send a letter to Oldtown. Demand their immediate capture." Cersei exclaimed. "Yes, the Archmesters will know how to deal with those savages." Pycelle said, unaware of how behind he was and that the Archmesters were all dead at that moment. Robert found this reasonable and was about to agree, but suddenly the door was banged on. "What is this now?" he growled as Ser Barristan Selmy approached the door, opening it. "Lord Commander," the royal guard began. This assistant to Maester Pycelle said he has urgent news from Oldtown. The city has been attacked. He spoke, and Barristan raised an eyebrow. "Let me see the letter," he requested, and the young man nervously approached, handing not one, but 2 letters to the commander of the guard. The door was closed the next moment, and Barristan approached the council table alone with the letters. "Is this true?" Jon Arryn exclaimed, as everyone looked on in surprise after hearing what the royal guard had said. "There are 2 letters here, one open, from the house of Hightower, and another sealed with the Artican symbol," he said, placing the letters on the table, while everyone looked on curiously. "Why do we have letters from Oldtown, while our master spy has no information about this?" Baelish commented while Varys furrowed his brow. He had received nothing from Oldtown and was somewhat worried about this. "It doesn't matter now. Let's see this letter." The hand of the king picked up the open letter and unfolded it in front of everyone. "This," he looked shocked as he swallowed dryly and began to read the letter. "From Rick Hightower, the current protector of Oldtown in the absence of my brother. Urgent. Oldtown is under a devastating attack at this moment. We were deceived when we welcomed the Articans with their wild king into our city. They initiated an inside attack and massacred countless Archmesters, Septons, and the current High Septon who was in the city was brutally killed by the same. A group of Articans breached the North Gate, causing great destruction with wildfire. They destroyed the walls and are invading the city. At the port, 2,000 men are trying to capture 10 Artican ships. But at sea, another 90 are approaching the city to invade it. The citadel is surrounded, and the local resistance is being rapidly decimated. The situation is critical and requires immediate assistance. So far, our efforts to contain the Artican advance have been in vain. The population is in panic, and our defenses are collapsing. Jon Artica has demonstrated sorcerer powers as rumored, controlling animals to attack our soldiers, creating a scenario of unimaginable terror. I urgently request the deployment of military reinforcements to assist in the defense of Oldtown and the protection of its citizens. We do not know how long we will hold out, but the city will fall shortly. The presence of all possible troops from this kingdom is vital to repel this attack and restore order. I also ask that you inform the other lords and nobles about the severity of the situation, so that all may prepare for the threat Jon Artica represents. We await your swift response and support in our time of need. Jon Arryn finished the letter while the entire room entered into a silence with wide eyes, wondering if what they heard was true. Pycelle trembled. They killed the Archmesters and the High Septon along with other elders of the faith. He could not believe it. Baelish, who had been planning to pit the Articans against the Seven Kingdoms, was stunned to know that they had actually attacked a city and massacred important people. This cannot be ignored. One of the great cities of Westeros is being attacked. Has been attacked, you mean? This raven must have taken days to get here, and from what I see, it was intended for the Tyrells in Highgarden. But somehow, it was intercepted, Varys commented calmly. I knew we couldn't trust these savages. Cersei exclaimed, frustrated. I agree with the Queen. This is an affront to our faith and against the crown. They launched an attack and must be looting one of our cities at this moment. Jon Arryn commented. Robert had a serious face this time, as he tapped the table with a finger tapping on it and thinking. He turned to Jon. Open the other letter. I want to see the outcome of this attack. Jon Arryn nodded while breaking the seal with the Artican symbol and opening the letter written by the king of Artica himself. To the king of Westeros. I was known as Jon Snow, and now I call myself king of Artica, Jon Artica, and I am here at the Citadel after taking control of the city following threats and orders for Oldtown soldiers to kill my men. We were threatened because the Maesters wanted to demand absurd things, such as Artica submitting to the control of people beneath the riffraff. They wanted to take a body of my giants, dwarves, our armor, and swords. The Septons called us savage heretics and wanted us to deny our faith, saying we had no support or money in the north, and that we would need them to continue our business to the southern kingdoms. They even wanted to deny my son, so that I would have a southern heir and name my 2 children from different mothers, who would become bastards. That was the last straw, as soon as they gave the order to capture us. Then, I began to kill everyone in the room without mercy, whether Maesters or Septons. I cut down all those greedy damned who dared threaten my homeland, my people, my wife and son. Afterward, I began killing all the soldiers who faced us in the city. My response to all the dealings I've had in the last moon is a fuck you to you all. I no longer care to negotiate with you. After all, since I came to the South, I am filled with schemes and greedy people trying to profit from my deals. I dominated the city except for the eastern side. After all, my goal was the Citadel and Hightower, and I am finally leaving it. I am wounded, King Robert, emotionally wounded. For the harm done to me and my Artica, I am taking over 600,000 books from the Citadel with their treasures as compensation for moral damages. I came to negotiate books, but unfortunately, we leave with traumas that my poor people will suffer and carry for the rest of their lives after this visit. If you are angry and want some reclamation of this justice done amidst the injustice that was committed against us, I sincerely do not care about your opinion. Artica will be open to wars, and I invite you to come to the north if you want to fight. He finished reading the entire letter, leaving the room in silence for a while. This is insane and illogical. Everyone thought at the same time. Many there furrowed their brows, even more after the news of the attack on the Citadel. Jon Artica was openly declaring war with Artica at that moment. What Ned's son has done, Jon Arryn murmured. This is certainly horrible. He looted the Citadel and killed many important people. Varys commented, My king, I ask you to summon all the realms. This can no longer be delayed. Pycelle exclaimed in horror. Robert was still recovering after what he heard in that letter. He turned back to everyone waiting for a decision and nodded firmly. Stannis, I want ships blocking the sea next to Dragonstone. I'm going to grab my hammer. I want to see if the boy has the guts even in front of me. Robert exclaimed, We need to summon our subjects. Cersei exclaimed with a nervous tone now. Yes, let's do that. But it will take a long time if he's heading north at this moment. Jon Arryn spoke. They also have wildfire. We should be careful at sea. Barristan commented, although he did not know that Jon had a good use for them in harpoons. Another thing, Ricard Hightower said he can control animals. Who's to say he isn't spying on us right now? Varys finally had his chance to raise that issue, one that consumed him in the last moon every day. That, everyone frowned at that, starting to believe the stories and rumors about Jon Artica. It doesn't matter now, just eliminate any animal from the Red Keep and prepare to face them. Summon all the gates to call ships to block the fleet. We will eliminate those 150 ships. Robert shouted as he prepared for battle. Yes, I will send a summoning letter to all the houses of Westeros. Jon Arryn spoke. They might take time for that, but if they needed to summon all the armies of the Seven Kingdoms, they would do so. There's something written on the back of the letter. Barristan noticed something on the letter next to Jon Arryn, while he also saw it turning the letter over. What's written there, Jon? Robert asked immediately. Jon seemed a bit cautious until he began to speak loudly. You think I don't know about the schemes you were plotting against me? He started. I know very well that Baelish made contact with the Lord of Seagulltown, preparing to simulate an attack by our ships, but I did exactly what they wanted and did not expect at the same time, decimating them all, he said while Baelish looked like he saw a ghost as everyone stared at him. I know about your fancy for women who look like Lady Stark. That's really disgusting. Jon Arryn read, frowning. The same could be said of the Queen. He continued. I know you asked pirates to attack my ships with my wife heading north through a royal guard. I know your secrets, and you really know how to deceive your king, he read, making Cersei even paler than Baelish with that revelation. What is he talking about? That's a lie. She immediately exclaimed. While everyone looked at her a bit surprised, Robert frowned as he stared at her, trying to understand what the letter meant by that. Jon sighed before reading the last words of the letter. So I will not forget you, and when I find you, I will kill you. He finished the letter with everyone just looking, not knowing what to think about it. Back to the west. As the days passed, the waters in front of Lannisport were finally seen with a huge fleet of 150 ships heading in that direction, while Jaime looked off the side of the ship. Soon you will go to your home. I hear your father's shit's gold. Did he make your hair too? Jaime had to listen to a dwarf mock him, while even if he wanted to retaliate, he had been beaten in sparring in the last few days on this ship, hoping to finally get away from those crazy people.